Welcome back, brothers, to Amolor. Tonight's story, the Deathwatch are hunting something that shouldn't exist. Before getting into the madness, be sure to like and comment any videos and topics you want to see in the future. Be sure to subscribe from the Emperor. And I want to thank you guys for the support. I've been killing it like always. Now, let's get into the video.
Karthak Secundus burned beneath a sky that had forgotten the color of dawn. From high orbit, the Forge Hive world was a wound in the void, a rust-black sphere veiled in ash storms and the slow turning rings of its own destruction. Orbital manufactoria drifted in ruin above it, their kilometer-long spines snapped and bleeding atmosphere in silver streams. Defense platforms burned where they hung, each one a dying altar of steel, their macro cannons silent, their void shields collapsed, their cathedral towers spilling bodies and molten armor into the dark. The planet below answered with fire. Hive stacks pierced the cloud layers like the teeth of a buried god, their upper spires choked by smoke, their mid-levels drowning in chemical night, their foundations lost beneath furnace glow and the red pulse of manufactorum reactors that should have died days before. No hymn rose from Karthak Secundus, no ordered Binharic praise, no astropathic choir singing compliance to terror, only static, only screams, only the pulse of something vast moving beneath the skin of the world. In the outer darkness beyond the system's mining belt, where cold stars watched with the indifference of dead kings, station vigilant lament hung in silence. It was not marked on any imperial chart carried by merchant, pilgrim, or admiral. Its hull was black, its auger veins folded like the wings of a corpse bird, its gun batteries masked beneath false plating and void dust. The station belonged to the Ordo Xenos, though no such truth would ever be spoken aloud where lesser ears could hear it. It listened for alien whispers. It weighed worlds by the measure of their usefulness and their contamination. It judged in secret, as all true servants of the throne must judge. Within its astropathic sanctum, the choir had been screaming for 9 hours. The sanctum was built like a chapel and a crypt. Iron saints watched from the walls with blind bronze eyes. Incense crawled in bitter grey layers through the air, failing to mask the stink of cooked nerve tissue, sweat, blood, and old fear. The astropaths sat chained in a crescent before the receiving dais, their sockets sealed with silver caps, their scalps wired into brass communion helms. Their robes had once been white. Now they were darkened at the throat and chest, where blood had poured from mouths, nostrils, and the soft ruined places where eyes had been taken in service to the Emperor's light. Lex mechanics stood behind them, fingers twitching over rune boards, trying to render madness into script. Servo skulls drifted through the incense haze, their quills scratching parchment with frantic little clicks. A confessor intoned protective verses until his voice broke. A sanctioned psyker vomited black bile into his rebreather and continued working because no one had granted him permission to fall. The signal came again. It did not arrive as sound. It arrived as pressure. The chamber flexed around it. Candles guttered, then burned green. The astropaths arched in their chains, as if hooks had been driven through their ribs and hauled upward by invisible hands. One of them bit through his tongue. Another began to speak in 3 voices at once, each voice layered beneath the next. One human, one wet and chitinous, one made of static and laughter. The chief Lex mechanic looked up from his console, face pale beneath the augmetic cage bolted around his skull. "My lord," he said, "the transmission repeats." Inquisitor Lord Acastian Vare stood before the dais with his hands folded over the silver head of his cane. He was old only in the way a blade was old, thin, honed, preserved by purpose. His face was a map of scars and rejuvenate tension, his eyes deep set beneath a brow heavy with suspicion. He wore black, not for mourning, but because black showed less blood. A rosette hung at his throat, heavy enough to break the teeth of any fool who mistook it for ornament. "Render it," Vare said. "My lord, the choir is deteriorating." then render it before they finish dying. The Lex mechanic swallowed. He made the sign of the cog with shaking fingers and bent back over the console. Brass keys clacked. Ink needles stabbed parchment. The sanctum's central hollow well shuddered, sparked, and began to form an image out of pale green light and red interference. At first, there was only snow. Then Karthak Secundus emerged, not as an orbital Pict, but as a psychic memory. The world was seen through the mind of someone dying in terror. Hives leaned over burning plains. Ash storms crawled across continents. The orbital ring was broken in 4 places, its wreckage falling in slow fire through the upper atmosphere. Beneath it all, beneath the world's armor of steel and stone, something pulsed. The image shifted. A fortress rose from darkness. It was built in the style of the traitor legions, a mountain of black iron and brutal geometry, all hard angles, murder holes, siege plates, and spiked bastions. Chains the size of transit rails hung from its towers. Bodies were nailed to its walls in ranks so vast they became a second masonry. Some still moved. Their hands opened and closed in the ash wind. Their lips worked soundlessly around prayers the Emperor did not answer. The image shifted again. Birth sacks hung from the roof of a manufactorum cathedral. They were immense, translucent, veined with black and violet, each one swollen around the curling shape of some unborn horror. Men in red robes, or what remained of them, had been suspended around the sacks in iron frames. Their limbs were gone. Their torsos had been opened with surgical care. Cables, feeder tubes, and tendrils entered them in place of organs. A skinned Scitarius hung nearest the picked source, his metal spine exposed, his cranial implants still blinking with data traffic, while something small and many-legged chewed its way out from under his jaw. The hollow stuttered. The choir screamed harder. A voice came through the sanctum vox. It was not the voice of any astropath. It was deep, patient, and wrapped in the iron contempt of an Astartes who had outlived empires. "Witness," it said. The confessor dropped his prayer book. The hollow showed a chamber of flesh and steel. A living mountain crouched within it, a Tyranid organism grown beyond the clean classifications of imperial xenology. It had the hunched brutality of a carnifex, the elongated skull crest of a synapse beast, and the coiled wings of some abyssal thing never meant to crawl beneath a real sun. Its carapace had been plated with black iron. Nails and chains pierced its chitin. Runes had been burned into the bone ridges of its skull. Its talons scraped furrows through the deck as it trembled. Before it stood a warrior in corrupted plate. He was huge, even for one of the Adeptus Astartes. His armor was iron-grey beneath layers of grime, old blood, and yellow-black hazard striping nearly lost beneath corrosion. Servo arms unfolded from his back, like the limbs of a steel spider. His helm was wrought in the shape of a snarling skull mask, one eye lens burning red, the other a cluster of augmetic lenses that clicked and narrowed, as if tasting the fear of those who watched. A cloak of flayed hides hung from his shoulders, stitched with oath papers taken from dead imperial commanders. At his side rested a chain axe with teeth too large for mortal hands to lift. Vare did not move. His expression did not change. "Heretic Astartes," he said. The Lex Mechanic whispered, "Confirmed, my lord. Warplate configuration suggests Legion origin, siege craft markings, probable Iron Warrior's descent." The hollow juddered. The Tyranid beast lowered itself before the Chaos Lord, not in worship, in agony. Its limbs shook, its claws gouged sparks from the floor. Its throat sac pulsed as if it were trying to shriek, but had been denied the mercy of sound. Thick cables ran from its spine into a throne of iron machinery behind it, where human psychers had been wired into a choir of wet mouths and exposed brains. Their skulls were open. Their thoughts were being used as bridles. The Chaos Lord rested one gauntlet upon the beast's bowed head. The Vox carried his voice again. The swarm learns. Hunger can be broken. Instinct can be chained. Even the great devourer may be made to kneel. One astropath burst apart in his restraints. There was no clean detonation. His skull split with a sound like a ripe fruit crushed under a tank tread, and grey matter sprayed across the brass face of the communion helm. His body convulsed, hands clawing at nothing, while the chains kept him upright in a mockery of devotion. The servo skulls drifted closer, recording everything. Vare turned his head slightly. "Remove the remains. Keep the helm active." A pair of blank-faced servitors obeyed, dragging the twitching corpse away, while the helm continued receiving through exposed wires and clinging tissue. The hollow collapsed into darkness. For several heartbeats, only the astropath's ragged breathing filled the sanctum. Then the second transmission began. This one came as Vox record, degraded and layered beneath industrial noise. A manufacturum district appeared in grainy red light. The camera belonged to an overseer skull mounted above an assembly line. The district designation crawled across the lower edge in Mechanicus script, but the runes broke apart before translation could finish. Thousands of workers stood at their stations. They did not run. They did not stop. They chanted in dull, exhausted unison, while the great conveyor belts moved before them. Their hands fed shell casings into presses. Their lips shaped machine prayers learned before childhood memory. Their backs were bent. Their flesh was grey with dust. Above them, censers swung from gantries, pouring sacred smoke into a hall already thick with promethium fumes and corpse stink. From the conveyor vents, feeder organisms emerged. They were small at first. Pale, wet things like fists wrapped in chitin, all claws and hooked mouths. They spilled from between rollers and coolant pipes, skittering under boots, climbing legs, finding gaps in work robes and pressure masks. The first worker to fall did so without breaking the chant. His voice only rose in pitch as the organisms entered him beneath the ribs and began eating upward. The line continued. The overseers had locked the district in production right. No alarm overrode the labor command. No mercy protocol existed in a forge hive built for war. Men screamed the catechism of function while their bellies opened and loops of intestines slapped wetly against the iron floor. A press operator kept feeding casings into his machine after half his face had been gnawed away, his remaining eye fixed on the warning rune that promised punishment for inefficiency. Another worker tried to pull a feeder from his throat and tore out his own windpipe with it, collapsing across the belt. The machine accepted him as raw obstruction, crushed him flat, and moved on. Then larger shapes came through the vents, gaunts, but wrong. Their jaws had been reinforced with steel clamps. Their forelimbs ended in blades grown around rusted chain teeth. Some bore scraps of flayed human skin stapled to their backs, marked with blasphemous sigils that crawled when the picked feed tried to focus. They did not rush like ordinary beasts. They moved in ordered bursts, waiting for whistle bursts from speakers mounted in the ceiling. Advance, kill, withdraw, feed, advance again. A tech priest entered the frame with a cohort of Skitari. The priest's crimson robes were torn and soaked black from the hem upward. His mechadendrites snapped and twitched around him. He broadcast classification cant even as the creatures overran his escort. Galvanic fire cracked through the hall. Radium carbines spat death. The Skitari fought without fear, without panic, without retreat, their metal legs braced amid rivers of blood and worker remains. The gaunts adapted. They flooded beneath the firing lines, climbed the walls, dropped from above. One Skitarius lost his head to a hooked talon and continued firing until a second organism tore out his reactor pack. Another was dragged into a feeder pit, his augmetic limbs still kicking as his torso vanished beneath a knot of chitin and teeth. The tech priest seized a specimen in a servo claw and began reciting its deviations from known Tyranid warrior strains. His words became screams when cables descended from the ceiling. They were not Tyranid. They were machine tendrils, barbed and oil slick, tipped with surgical hooks. They punched through the tech priest's back, stomach, throat, and skull, lifting him above the floor. His body spasmed. His vox grill burst into binharic panic. The pict feed zoomed as if commanded by an unseen intelligence. The tech priest was opened, not killed, opened. His organs were unfolded into copper trays. His data ports were forced wide. Living tendrils entered the sockets along his spine, while Tyranid feeder organisms nested inside the cavity of his chest. His voice returned, stripped of pain and personality, reduced to a wet, clicking monotone. Specimen group designation pending. Synapse absence contradicted by coordinated behavior. Warp resonance detected. Machine spirit contamination detected. Omnissiah preserve. Omnissiah preserve. Omnissiah preserve. The recording ended in laughter. It was the same deep voice from before. Inquisitor Vare stood in silence as the last static faded. Around him, men made the signs of their faith. The confessor whispered to the Emperor. The Lex Mechanics whispered to the machine god. The surviving astropaths whimpered in their chains. Blind heads bowed beneath the weight of what they had carried. Vare did not pray. Strategic summary, he said. A naval savant stepped forward, robes stiff with wax seals. Planetary Defense Force Command is presumed annihilated. All orbital defense assets are either destroyed, compromised, or silent. Hive Task, Hive Orison, and the Western Forge belts remain sealed from within. Civilian population estimate remains in the billions. Astra Militarum Crusade elements are translating at the system edge. Earliest mass landing capability is delayed by minefield disruption and debris saturation. Enemy fleet strength. Unclear, my lord. No major Hive fleet signatures. No natural Tyranid migration wake. No bioship mass consistent with known swarm ingress. The organisms appear to have emerged planet-side. That is impossible, said the confessor. Vare looked at him. The old priest remembered himself and lowered his gaze. Forgive me, my lord. I spoke in weakness. You spoke in ignorance. See that it does not become habit. A Vox officer removed his headset with trembling hands. My lord, evacuation petitions continue from the sealed manufactorum domes. Noble spires request priority extraction. Several Mechanicus enclaves offer data tribute in exchange for orbital lift capacity. There are also guard troop ships requesting permission to deploy humanitarian corridors before full assault. No evacuations, Vare said. The officer stared for half a breath too long. Vare's cane struck the deck once. The sound cracked through the sanctum like a gunshot. The population of Karthak Secundus is no longer an imperial asset. It is a containment burden. Every shuttle that rises from that world is a possible vector. Every refugee is a possible host. Every priest, noble, child worker, wounded soldier, tech adept, and void-trained officer is now a question the Imperium cannot afford to ask gently. Seal the world. Burn unauthorized launches. Any vessel breaking quarantine is to be destroyed without challenge. The naval savant bowed. By your will, my lord. No, Vare said. By necessity. My will is irrelevant. He turned back to the dead hollow well. Heretic Astartes and Tyranid bioforms acting without natural swarm support. Artificial synapse. Warp contamination. Dark mechanicum intervention. A breeder fortress beneath an active forge hive. His mouth tightened by the smallest measure. This is not invasion. It is manufacture. The confessor made a strangled sound. Then the archenemy seeks to command the great devourer. The archenemy seeks many things. It often mistakes appetite for mastery. Vare lifted his cane and pointed toward the blank air where the kneeling beast had been. That warrior does not yet understand what he has touched. My lord, the Lex Mechanic said, what force shall be tasked? Vare's eyes were cold. Not the guard, not first. They will drown the surface in bodies and shells, as is their duty. Not the Mechanicus. Their curiosity has already helped birth this obscenity. not the Navy. Lances may kill the world, but they will not answer the necessary question. The Vox officer knew the answer before Ver spoke it. Every man in the chamber did. A hidden watch fortress received the order moments later, carried through ciphered astropathic knives and sealed beneath inquisitorial authority. Far from Karthak's, beyond mapped routes, within a bastion of black stone and older oaths, warriors in sable armor began to wake from vigil. Silver arms were locked into place. Bolters were drawn from reliquary vaults. Hellfire magazines were blessed. Kraken rounds were counted. Frag cannons were lifted by hands, strong enough to crush skulls to paste. Names of dead Xenos breeds were recited in low voices. Kill markers were opened. Oaths were renewed. The Deathwatch were summoned. Not to save Karthak Secundus. Not to redeem its billions. Not to comfort the doomed or avenge the already dead. They were summoned to descend into the world's infected heart, look upon the thing growing there, and decide whether it could be killed with blade, bolter, flame, and will. If not, the world would die screaming beneath the Emperor's mercy. Back aboard Station Vigilant Lament, the final picked capture resolved without warning. It was brief, less than a breath of vision stolen from hell. The Tyranid warrior knelt on an iron floor slick with blood and amniotic slime. Its limbs were pinned by chains. Its skull crest had been split open, and black cables burrowed into the exposed meat of its brain. Its jaws opened in silent agony. Before it stood the Chaos Lord, one hand raised like a priest offering benediction, the other gripping a barbed control spear driven through the beast's spine. Behind them, in the red gloom, the living mountain of chitin moved. The Chaos Lord turned toward the picked source, as if he could see every soul watching across the void. Then he spoke one final time. "Come, black-armored hunters, bring me your finest flesh." The Oath of Oblivion translated into real space without ceremony. There was no triumphant flare of heraldic beacon, no proud transmission of identity to the listening void, no litany cast across open Vox for lesser vessels to hear and take comfort from. The strike cruiser came from the warp like a blade drawn from a wound, black-hulled and silent, its void shields crawling with the last blue witchlight of translation. Frost steamed from its armored flanks. Its engines burned low and angry. Along its prow, beneath layers of ablative plating and sanctified kill marks, the sigil of the Deathwatch stared into the Karthak system with one silver skull and an oath older than any mortal aboard. Below it, Karthak Secundus turned in its grave. The world was not yet dead, but it had begun the ritual. Firestorms moved across the ash wastes. Hive Task vomited smoke from 100 ruptured spires. Broken defense platforms drifted in corpse orbits, their gun decks cracked open, their crew compartments spilling frozen bodies into the dark. Farther out, Astra Militarum transports were translating in staggered waves, each vessel dragging its own wounds from the immaterium. Their hulls were crowded with men, armor, artillery, priests, medici coffins, and enough ammunition to turn continents into hammered ruin. They came as all servants of the throne came to a doomed world, late, faithful, and already half-condemned. The Oath of Oblivion did not join their formation. It passed through them like judgment passing through prayer. On its strategium, Inquisitor Lord Acastian Ver watched the planet through a towering oculus of armored glass. The chamber around him was a cathedral of war. Servitors hung in brass cages above the command pits, their skulls wired into cogitator stacks. Naval thralls moved in silence beneath banners of black velvet and parchment, careful not to speak unless spoken to. Hollow icons crawled across the display well, marking dead stations, enemy heat blooms, suspected bioform concentrations, failed astropathic routes, and the sealed hives where billions waited behind adamantine gates for salvation that had already been denied them. Ver leaned on his cane and looked down upon Karthaks as one might study rot beneath a surgeon's lamp. "Status of the guard elements," he said. A shipmaster in black uniform bowed without looking up. Crusade vanguard has entered the outer system, my lord. Krieg siege regiments, Mordant line infantry, Cadian armor remnants, Elysian drop cadres, and attached artillery cohorts. Full mustering will take days. Minefields and debris storms obstruct mass descent. They will descend where ordered. Yes, my lord. Humanitarian petitions? Still multiplying, my lord. Hive task noble strata transmit offers of tithe, relic, and gene record. Mechanicus enclaves request extraction of priesthood personnel and sacred data. Several guard commanders petition for civilian corridor establishment before orbital interdiction hardens. Ver did not blink. Denied. Repeat the quarantine decree until their Vox systems fail. If any craft breaks atmosphere without my seal, destroy it. The shipmaster bowed deeper. By your authority. By the Emperor's necessity, Ver corrected. Authority is ornament, necessity is truth. Far below the strategium, beneath decks sealed by warded bulkheads and guarded by mute serfs with shock mauls, the arming chambers of the Deathwatch woke to the sound of iron prayers. Kill Team Epitaph stood within a circular vault lit by lumen strips and votive flame. Every wall was etched with kill oaths. Every alcove bore trophies taken from things mankind was never meant to name. A broken Necron death mask watched from behind stasis glass. A Tyranid warrior skull, bleached and sealed in purity wax, hung above a rack of heavy weapons. Orc tusks, as long as combat blades were chained beside splinter rifles, chitin hooks, alien bones, and fragments of armor taken from Xenos war leaders, whose species had been reduced to ash and footnote. At the center of the chamber, 6 warriors prepared for war. They did not hurry. Haste was for mortal soldiers and dying men. The Adeptus Astartes knew urgency, but urgency in them was controlled, ritualized, made into discipline so complete it resembled stillness. Armor serfs moved around them with bowed heads, fastening ceramite plates, locking fiber bundles, sealing ammunition feeds, and reciting the catechisms of function in low voices that trembled despite long practice. Watch Captain Severian Cordain stood first among them, black armor assembled piece by piece around a body made for conquest. His left arm was silver from pauldron to gauntlet, polished not to shine, but to remember. The heraldry of his birth. Chapter remained upon his right shoulder, a black cross on white, stark and severe. Wax seals hung from his breastplate, each one stamped with the mark of the Ordo Xenos. His helm waited on a plinth before him, its lenses dark, its grille fashioned like a restrained snarl. A relic blade lay beside it, its edge anointed with sacred oils and micro-etched with prayers against alien flesh. A chaplain serf lifted a censer. Smoke coiled around Cordain's armor. "Name the foe," the serf whispered. "The Xenos," Cordain said. "Name the sin. Survival beyond sanction. Name the mercy. Extinction." The serf bowed and stepped away. Brother Sergeant Garen Voss locked his storm shield to his vambrace with a heavy magnetic clunk. He had the build of a walking bastion, all blunt force and siege patience. His birth pauldron bore the clenched fist of the Imperial Fists, yellow darkened by campaign grime and old scoring. His thunderhammer rested upright beside him, the weapon head wrapped in prayer chains. Armor runes blinked across his breastplate as the suit's machine spirit accepted his weight, his breath, his anger. He rolled one shoulder, testing the shield's response, and the whole vault seemed to take note of the motion. Brother Skaldi Hrothgar laughed softly, while a serf chained a flamer canister to his combi weapon. The sound was low and cruel, not mirthful. His Space Wolf's pauldron showed a snarling wolf head over grey plate marked by tooth and claw trophies. His hair had been bound in iron rings. His chain blade was no elegant relic. It was a butcher's hymn, broad-toothed, frost-etched, and ugly with use. Fenrisian runes had been carved into its casing, though the teeth themselves bore newer marks, each one cut after some alien thing had died screaming beneath them. "Too much incense," Scaldy muttered. "The dead world already stinks enough." Cordain did not look at him. "Then breathe through your helm." "Aye, watch, Captain. I would not wish to offend the nose of a corpse." "You will offend nothing once the seal is locked." Scaldy grinned and said no more. Brother Malchior Draven knelt before his plasma incinerator, one black gauntlet resting over its casing, while an armory thrall chanted the litany of contained suns. The Dark Angel's face was hidden behind his helm already. He had sealed himself before the others, as if flesh were an unnecessary confession. His right pauldron bore the winged sword of his chapter, half obscured by black wax purity strips. The plasma coils of his weapon throbbed with caged blue light. Every pulse painted the surrounding armor racks in ghost fire. Brother Kaed Rauk stood without serfs. The iron hand permitted no unaugmented fingers upon his warplate, unless necessity demanded insult. His servo harness unfolded and refolded behind him, testing blades, clamps, injectors, auspex spines, and a compact melter cutter. His left arm was silver by Deathwatch oath. Much of the rest of him was iron by choice. Beneath his helm, his voice came through the vox as a scraped machine growl. Tyranid tissue under empiric saturation should degrade, mutate into uselessness, or be rejected by synaptic coherence. Stable adaptation under warp pressure is statistically aberrant. Cordain turned his head. Meaning the Heretek has either lied through theatrical display or achieved a violation worth erasing from history. Your preference? Erase both possibilities. The last warrior armed in silence. Brother Noctis, the Black Shield, had no chapter badge. His right pauldron was bare black ceramite, rubbed smooth where heraldry had once been and would never be again. He accepted his stalker pattern bolt gun from a reliquary cradle, checked the loaded magazine, then drew his Xenophase blade half a handspan from its sheath. The blade drank the light around it. No oath hung from his lips, no warrior jest, no claim of vengeance. His silence had weight. Even Scaldy did not spend mockery upon it. An armory servitor rolled forward, its treads clicking over deck grooves. Its chest opened like a shrine, revealing rows of magazines marked by colored seals. Hellfire rounds for bioforms, their mutagenic acid charges sanctified for the ruin of alien flesh. Kraken penetrator rounds for thick carapace and armor, long cased and heavy with judgment. Dragonfire rounds for enemies lurking in cover, each shell a little sun for the dark places. Vengeance rounds lay in a separate rack, their machine spirits volatile and spiteful. Beside them rested melter charges, stasis-marked toxin vials, frag grenades, crack grenades, and silver-tipped execution rounds stamped with inquisitorial cipher. Cordain took Hellfire first. The others followed according to roll, without instruction, without overlap, without waste. Draven accepted plasma cells. Voss loaded Kraken rounds and checked his shield anchor. Scaldy took Dragonfire and Promethium. Rauk selected Auspex skulls, melter charges, and a sealed canister of anti-spore alchemical burn agent. Noctis chose Stalker rounds one by one, each loaded with the reverence of a monk, placing bones in a reliquary. The chamber vox clicked. Vare's voice entered the vault without warmth. "Kill Team Epitaph. Attend." The warriors turned as one toward the hololithic display rising above the chamber floor. Karthaks appeared in miniature, rotating in diseased red light. Hive Task flared brighter than the rest, its upper spires marked by dead zones, and its lower forge belt swallowed by interference. Beneath it, a second bloom pulsed, deep enough to be almost geological. Vare's image formed beside the world, thin and severe. "Your objective is not rescue," he said. "Your objective is not defense. Your objective is confirmation, decapitation, and containment. You will insert into the dead upper spires of Hive Task, descend through the corpse lift network, penetrate the underforge, and locate the origin of the astropathic transmission. You will identify the heretic Astartes commander. You will determine the viability of the artificial Tyranid strain. You will destroy both if possible. And if not possible, Voss said, then you will transmit proof sufficient for planetary purgation. Scaldi gave a low growl. Billions below. Vair's image turned its head toward him. Billions are not a shield against necessity, son of Fenris. They are kindling if contaminated. Noctis spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, roughened by helm grill static. Rules of engagement concerning Imperial survivors. Vair's answer came without pause. Any Imperial unit displaying infection, psychic contamination, Xenos sympathy, uncontrolled mutation, exposure to restricted knowledge, or obstruction of your mission is to be purged. Any commander who refuses quarantine is to be purged. Any priest who incites evacuation is to be purged. Any Mechanicus adept attempting to preserve samples without sanction is to be purged. This includes assets of rank, bloodline, oath, or usefulness. The arming chamber was silent except for the hum of armor reactors. No one objected. That was the terror of them. Not rage, not zeal shouted loud enough to hide doubt. Obedience, perfect and black. 6 transhuman warriors receiving the death sentence of a world's hope and accepting it as another line in the mission brief. Cordain locked his helm to his gorget. Pressure seals hissed. His lenses ignited red. The Xenos does not bargain, he said. The heretic does not repent. The contaminated do not survive. By your word, said Voss. By the long vigil, said Draven. By iron and tooth, said Scaldi. By the Omnissire's severing calculus, said Rauk. Noctis said nothing, but his blade slid home with a sound like a breath being cut. The deployment klaxons began. The kill team moved, through arming vaults, through black corridors lined with oath plaques, past reliquaries sealed behind adamantium doors, where dead warriors' helms watched from shadowed alcoves. Serfs knelt as they passed. None reached out. None begged blessing. To touch a warrior of the Deathwatch before insertion was to distract a loaded weapon. In the launch cathedral, drop pods waited in their cradles, black and silver, their hulls marked with kill script and heat scars from wars no remembrancer would record. Tech adepts moved between them, anointing retro thrusters, checking restraint thrones, murmuring to machine spirits eager to fall. Beyond the armored launch shutters, Karthak Secundus filled the void below, immense and poisoned, its burning hives shining through ash cloud like coals buried under skin. Cordain entered the lead pod. Restraint slammed over his shoulders. Weapon mag locks engaged. The others took their places in adjoining pods, each warrior sealed alone with breath, armor hum, and the promise of impact. Vox channels narrowed. External sound died. The world became heartbeat, reactor pulse, and the low murmur of targeting spirits counting down in Binharic cant. Vair's voice spoke one final time across the command link. Watch Captain Cordain. Bring me truth, not hope. Cordain flexed his gauntleted hand around the grip of his bolter. Hope is not part of my oath. The launch shutters opened. For a moment, the drop pods stared down into hell. Then the oath of oblivion fired them into the dark. They fell like black meteors, retrojets screaming, hulls heating red as they punched through the debris field toward Carthax's poisoned atmosphere. Around them, fragments of defense platforms tumbled in flame. Frozen corpses shattered against pod armor and spun away in clouds of glittering bone. Far below, Hive Task rose through ash and storm, its spires broken, its landing bastions dark, its gun towers twitching with stolen life. The Vox crackled. At first, Cordain heard only static, then a breath, then a voice. It was an Astartes voice, deep and broken, dragged through pain and distance. It spoke in the cadence of a warrior dying inside his helm. Epitaph, it whispered. Turn back. The black womb is open. Cordain's eye lenses narrowed. Identify, The answer came with a wet laugh. Something rose from the clouds below, huge and swollen, a living mine hurled upward by muscular launch organs hidden in the hive's ruptured spires. It was a sack of chitin, gas, and twitching tendrils, pulsing with internal green fire as it climbed toward the descending pods. Across every Vox channel, the dead Space Marine's voice began to scream. The living mine burst before it touched them. It flowered in the upper air like an obscene star, a bladder of chitin and gas rupturing under the strike cruiser's point defense fire. Burning ichor scattered across the descent path. Chunks of twitching muscle slapped against ceramite hulls and hissed away in the heat of atmospheric entry. For a heartbeat, the Vox was full of the dead Astartes' voice, screaming words that had no place in any loyal throat. Then Cordain cut the channel with a blink command and listened only to the machine spirit of his drop pod, counting the last seconds before impact. Hive Task rose beneath them. It was not a city. It was a continent of stacked iron, a mountain range built by mankind's terror of scarcity and faith in industry. Its walls were kilometers thick and black, with centuries of soot. Its upper spires pierced the ash cloud like spears thrust through a corpse shroud. Its lower districts vanished beneath smog, fire, and the crawling movement of things too numerous for the augurs to name cleanly. What had once been a forge hive was now an opened body. Conveyor arteries spilled flame. Transit tunnels pumped smoke. Hab towers sagged like broken ribs. The great manufactorum domes glowed from within, not with the sanctified heat of production, but with wet red pulses that beat in time with something buried far below. Beyond the hive walls, war had already taken root. Artillery lines stretched to the horizon in every direction, so vast they seemed less like military formations and more like a new geography imposed upon the ash wastes. Basilisk batteries fired in rolling sequence, their guns lifting, recoiling, lifting again, each shell passing overhead with a shriek that made the poisoned clouds tremble. Manticores emptied racks of rockets into the hive gates. Hydra flak tanks stitched the sky, shooting down spore clusters and corrupted servo drones. Lehman Russ squadrons advanced in iron waves through trenches already filling with their own dead, battle cannons hammering the great adamantine portals until molten metal ran down the gate faces like candle wax before an altar. Between the artillery and the walls lay the refugee fields. They were not fields for long. Men, robed workers, wounded soldiers, adepts without masters, shrine keepers, hab gangs, children of the forge who had never seen an unfiltered sky, all pressed against the quarantine lines in screaming masses. Loudhailers ordered them back in the Emperor's name. Priests begged them to accept containment as holy duty. Commissars drew pistols and shot the first ranks when panic surged too close to the wire. Then the infection signs appeared. A man opened his mouth, and a feeder organism forced itself out between his teeth, slick and blind and hungry. A child worker's spine split beneath his robe, sprouting chitin hooks. A wounded trooper began laughing in a voice that belonged to the astropathic dead. The quarantine line did what it had been ordered to do. Heavy flamers spoke. Promethium washed over the crowd in golden sheets. The screaming became one voice. Flesh blackened, fat popped, hair burned away. Men tried to climb over one another and became pillars of fire, hands fused to shoulders, faces melting into shapeless masks, while laser guns cracked and autocannons punished everything that still moved. Cordain watched through the drop pod's external feed, without comment. The guard were doing their duty. The pod struck Hive Task like the fist of an angry god. Impact turned thought into thunder. Restraints bit against ceramite. The machine spirit howled its landing cant. The pod's petals blew outward in explosive release, crushing marble, bone, and plasteel beneath them. Smoke and pulverized masonry filled the chamber. Cordain stepped from the pod with his bolter raised, red lenses cutting through the dust. The noble spire had been a palace once. Now it was a slaughterhouse dressed in gold. Crystal windows looked out over the burning world, most of them shattered inward by pressure waves. Banners of ancient forge dynasties hung in strips from vaulted ceilings. Statues of long-dead governors had been defaced with hooks, chains, and living sacks of translucent tissue. Officers of the Planetary Defense Force hung from the walls by their own command cords, bellies opened, medals nailed into exposed ribs. Their eyes had been replaced by vox beads. Their mouths had been wired open so their corpses could broadcast alarm tones through severed throats. Cogitator serfs lined the central gallery. They had been seated in neat rows, each skull opened at the crown, each brain pierced by copper needles and pale tendrils. Their fingers still worked across dead consoles, scratching useless commands into cracked keys. When Kill Team Epitaph entered the gallery, every serf turned its ruined face toward them in perfect unison. The alarm began. It was not a siren. It was a choir of screaming slaves, their dead lungs pumped by machinery, their voices torn into rhythm by corrupted logic engines. Brother Draven emerged from his own pod in a spill of ash and plasma light. Brother Voss followed, storm shield raised, thunderhammer crackling with restrained force. Skaldi came out laughing under his breath, Chainblade coughing alive in his grip. Rauk's pod had buried itself through 2 floors and opened below them, but his rune marker already moved toward the team with machine exactness. Noctis appeared last, as if the smoke had decided to become an armed warrior. Movement came from the archways. Cult-corrupted workers poured into the gallery, wearing fragments of factory gear and noble livery. Their heads were shaved raw. Their eyes had been stitched open. Some carried mining drills. Some carried bone knives. Some had Tyranid feeder claws grafted through their forearms, the alien limbs twitching with minds not their own. Behind them came gaunt forms, low to the ground, chitin patched with iron plates and strips of scripture skin. Their mouths clicked in time with the corpse alarm. Cordain did not raise his voice. Pattern epitaph, forward kill zone. The Deathwatch obeyed. There was no rush, no shouted panic, no heroic flourish. Voss moved to the front, with his shield angled to cover the left approach. Draven took the right, plasma coils brightening. Noctis vanished behind a pillar of black marble, his stalker bolter already seeking skulls. Skaldi paced half a step behind Cordain, eager but restrained. Rauk's Auspex skull rose through a floor breach, lenses spinning, target data feeding into every helm display. The first volley struck before the enemy reached 20 paces. Cordain's bolter spoke in measured thunder. Hellfire rounds detonated inside bodies, turning cultists into bursting sacks of acidic ruin. Chests opened outward. Heads vanished into red mist. Gaunt organisms convulsed as mutagenic payloads ate through their internal structures, limbs scissoring, spines knotting, jaws biting into their own flesh as they died. Noctis fired from shadow, each round entering an eye socket, throat, or exposed node, dropping targets before their deaths could interrupt the firing pattern. Voss held the line, shield-absorbing returned autogun fire and the impact of leaping bodies. When a gaunt slammed into him, he broke its spine with the rim of his shield and crushed its skull underfoot without looking down. Draven fired once. The plasma blast took a cluster of cultists and reduced them to a blue-white smear across the air. Their shadows remained on the wall for a moment, crisp and black, before the stone beneath them began to melt. "Advance," said Cordain. They advanced. Skaldi was released when the enemy broke the line. He entered them like a winter beast, entering a fold of livestock. His chainblade rose and fell, chewing through grafted limbs, skulls, torsos, and chitin plates. Promethium roared from his combi flamer, filling the archway with burning bodies. A hybrid worker with a distended jaw leapt for his helm. Skaldi caught it one-handed, drove it face first into the teeth of his running blade, and split it down the middle until both halves kicked apart across the marble. Another came at him with a mining saw. He took the blow on his pauldron, laughed, and punched his gauntlet through the creature's chest, fingers closing around spine and cable. When he tore his hand free, half its back came with it. "Come then," he snarled over the vox. "Come and be counted before the All-Father's corpse throne." "Discipline," Cordain said. Skaldi burned another 5 shapes in answer, but his kill arc tightened by a handspan. It was obedience, though it wore the skin of savagery. The gallery shook. Something larger forced itself through the far archway, breaking the frame apart with its shoulders. It had once been a Tyranid warrior, though that name now limped behind the thing it had become. Iron staples ran along its carapace, pinning metal plates into the living shell. Demon brands glowed along its ribs, each mark carved into grafted armor that had been bolted through flesh and bone. Strips of imperial scripture had been nailed into its chest, not as purity, but as mockery. Its upper arms carried bone blades grown around serrated steel. Its lower limbs ended in talons that sparked against the floor. It did not screech. It spoke in a cracked vox whisper. "Obey." The lesser organisms lurched forward. Draven stepped into the open and aimed at the center mass. The warrior moved with impossible speed, crossing the kill lane in a blur of chitin and black iron. Its blade struck Voss's shield hard enough to drive the Imperial fist back 2 steps. A second limb stabbed at Cordain's helm. Cordain turned the blow aside with his bolter casing and fired point blank into the creature's throat. Hellfire burst under its jaw. Acid and black blood sprayed across his breastplate. The warrior staggered, but did not fall. "Armor reinforcement confirmed," Rauk voxed. "Synapse lattice contaminated. Destroy the thoracic cage." "Draven," Cordain said. The Dark Angel answered with plasma. The first shot vaporized the warrior's left arms. The second struck the branded plates in its ribcage. The creature became light. Its torso opened in a sun-hot bloom, iron staples glowing, scripture strips igniting, demon marks shrieking as the flesh around them cooked away. The blast punched through it and scorched a crater in the far wall. What remained fell in sections, legs twitching, skull crest clattering against the floor, mouth still shaping the word obey, though no sound came. Rauk reached them as the last cultist died. The Iron Hand did not look at the corpses, except to step over them. His servo harness spread around a corrupted command servitor, wired into the gallery's central dais. The thing had once been human. Its torso was fused to a brass cogitator column. Its face had been peeled away and replaced with a cluster of wet lenses. Tyranid tendrils entered its mouth and ears, pulsing as they drank data from the machine spirit beneath. It screamed when Rauk approached. The scream became Binharic, then prayer, then static, then a child's voice begging to be unplugged. "Silence is preferable," Rauk said. A servo claw punched through the servitor's skull casing and peeled it open with a wet crack of bone and metal. Brain matter bulged around data spines. Rauk inserted a mechadendrite directly into the exposed mass. The servitor convulsed. Its heels drummed against the floor. Sparks spat from its chest. The smell of burned meat and hot copper filled the gallery. "Data is fragmented," Rauk said. "Machine spirit defiled. Organic overlay resisting extraction." "Break it," Cordain ordered. "I am." The servitor's scream rose until its throat tore. Then it stopped. Rauk's helm lenses flickered as stolen information crawled across the kill team's display feeds. A name appeared in red. Warsmith King Malrek Vol. Beneath it came fragments of record, drawn from Mechanicus archives, inquisitorial warnings, and the dying memory of Karthak's own command net. Once of Iron Warrior's stock, Siege Tyrant, Flesh Architect, Scourge of the Calyx defenses, Excommunicate beyond redemption, Master of the grafted host, self-proclaimed Sovereign of obedient evolution. Skaldi spat onto the floor. "Iron Carrion!" Voss tightened his grip on his hammer. "Traitor siegecraft and Xenos adaptation. This hive was lost before the first distress call." Cordain watched the name burn across his visor until it faded. No, it was offered. They moved downward. The noble spires narrowed into service arteries and chapel manufactoria, where wealth had once hidden the machinery required to sustain it. Corpse lifts hung in vertical shafts, their chains trembling from impacts far below. Every wall sweated condensation and blood. Alarm cherubs flew in circles with their wings nailed open, repeating dead evacuation orders. Once, through a shattered window, Cordain saw the war outside in its full immensity. Basilisk shells fell like judgment beyond the walls. Lehman Russ formations fired into breaches filled with crawling bodies. Guard infantry advanced in lines so dense they resembled ash-colored rivers, and those rivers broke again and again against the things pouring out of Hive Task's lower gates. Inside the Hive, the enemy had been quieter. That made it worse. They found the chapel manufactorum behind a barricade of cargo haulers, devotional engines, and bodies stacked as sandbags. Its doors were sealed with welding scars and prayer parchment. Men behind the barricade aimed laser guns, shotguns, and industrial cutters through murder holes, their hands shaking, their faces hollow with hunger and terror. A priest in a torn red robe stood among them, with an Aquila pendant clutched in both hands. "Hold," Cordain commanded over external vox. "We are the Emperor's judgment. Open." The men wept when they saw the black armor. Some fell to their knees. One tried to kiss Voss's storm shield, until the sergeant shoved him back hard enough to break teeth. The chapel stank of fear, incense, infection, and old blood. Perhaps 200 survivors remained. Factory militia, administratum clerks, wounded troopers, tech thralls without masters, men who had sealed themselves away while the Hive died around them. They had painted prayers on the walls in machine oil and blood. In the center of the chapel, a statue of the Emperor watched over them, with a face blackened by smoke. Cordain looked once across the chamber. "Scan them!" Rauk released 2 Auspex skulls. The devices drifted through the survivors, clicking, tasting breath, reading heat signatures, sampling blood from exposed wounds with needle. Tongues. Men flinched. One tried to run. Noctis shot him through the knee without a word. The man fell screaming. The skull descended and sampled him anyway. Runes flashed across Cordain's display. Contaminated. Not all. Enough. The priest stepped forward. His scalp was bleeding beneath a crown of self-inflicted cuts. "My lord, we kept faith. We barred the doors. We burned the bitten. We sang the canticle of iron until our throats failed. Mercy, Lord. In the Emperor's name, mercy." Cordain raised his bolter. "The contaminated do not survive." The first shot took the wounded man on the floor and burst his chest across the chapel stones. The second killed the priest beside the altar rail. Then the Deathwatch fired as one. It was not battle. It was procedure. Bolters cracked. Hellfire rounds detonated within bodies. Plasma fire washed the rear barricade in blue light. Skuldy's flamer filled the left transept, turning begging men into writhing torches. Voss stood at the door and killed those who tried to flee. Noctis shot only those who moved fastest. Rauk watched the Auspex readings until every infected rune went dark. When it was done, the chapel manufactorum was silent except for burning flesh and the hiss of cooling weapons. A single priest still lived beneath a fallen banner. Not the first priest, another, older. His legs were gone below the knees, eaten or cut away. His belly had been opened by shrapnel, and his hands pressed weakly against the glistening loops sliding from him. Cordain approached, bolter aimed at the man's face. The priest looked up. His eyes were not human anymore. Something vast and cold moved behind them. His lips split in a smile too wide for his dying face. When he laughed, it was with a Tyranid voice. "He has taught hunger to hate." Beneath Karthak Secundus, where the oldest foundations of the Forge Hive sank into the planet's tortured mantle, Malrek Vol watched a god of hunger fail to obey him. The chamber around him had once been a geothermal tithe cathedral, a place where red-robed priests had praised the machine god while drawing power from the deep heat of the world. Its vaulted roof vanished into smoke and shadow. Its pillars were black adamantium, thick as Hab towers, each carved with sacred Mechanicus cant, now defaced by hazard stripes, flayed skin banners, and the chained skulls of priests who had refused conversion. Furnace light rolled across everything in waves, red and orange and sickly green, catching on wet membranes and iron gantries, and the polished curve of chitinous growths that had no right to exist beneath a forge world. Flesh vats hung from the ceiling in ranks that stretched into darkness. Some were clear and trembling, swollen around curled organisms whose talons twitched against their birth sacs. Others were opaque, heavy with spoiled fluid, failed meat, and half-formed things that had drowned before they learned hunger. Chains ran between the vats in black loops. Prayer strips hung from them, not in devotion, but in mockery. Every parchment bore the last recorded pleas of a condemned worker, a failed subject, or a broken priest of Mars. Below the vats, upon a killing floor of grooved iron and old bone, the test subject roared. It was the size of a carnifex, but its body had been altered beyond the clean boundaries of imperial xenological terror. Its shoulders were high and plated in layered chitin, but iron braces had been driven through the shell to force the growth into siege angles. Its forelimbs ended in crushing claws, fitted with rotating teeth from industrial rock drills. Its head was too small for the swollen brutality of its frame, drawn forward into a blade-like skull crest that had been split and pinned open with bronze clamps. Behind the opened crest, grey nerve tissue pulsed in the furnace light, threaded through with black wires, silver hooks, and sigils that smoked without flame. Around it stood 300 prisoners. They were chained in concentric circles, their ankles bolted to the killing floor, their wrists bound to iron posts. Most were manufacturing workers taken from the lower hive. A few still wore the cracked armor of planetary defense troopers. Several tech adepts knelt among them, their red robes filthy, their augmetics removed or left sparking uselessly from butchered sockets. They had been positioned not as audience, but as stimulus. Pain taught, terror clarified, blood measured progress. A command pylon rose behind the beast, a tower of black iron, brass logic engines, and wet synapse tissue suspended in nutrient tubes. Severed heads hung from its upper frame, mouths sewn open, skulls wired into the machine so their dying brains could serve as psychic filters. A captured Tyranid node beast, reduced to little more than a trunk of nerves and quivering organs, had been nailed into the heart of the pylon. Its blind head jerked with every pulse of imposed control. Magos Excruciator Domak Sever stood at the pylon's base on 6 mechanical limbs, his body more surgical frame than man. His torso was wrapped in dark red steel. His face had been replaced by a narrow mask of stained ivory, beneath which feeder tubes clicked and sucked. Fine mechadendrites moved around him constantly, stitching, cutting, injecting, measuring. Where a loyal priest of the Adeptus Mechanicus might have worn the cog of Mars in reverence, Sever wore it inverted and split, half of it replaced by a stylized maw. Obedience pressure increased, Sever said. His voice came from several places at once, each tone layered in wet static and blasphemous Binharic. Synapse deprivation maintained, warp saturation within projected tolerance, pain response elevated, aggression focus unstable. Malrek Vol did not answer. He stood upon a raised platform of dark metal, one armored hand resting on the head of his chain axe, the other behind his back, like a king studying tribute. He was vast in his warplate, a lord of iron and old treachery. His armor bore the lineage of siege and betrayal, grey iron scarred by millennia, edged in black, marked with the yellow chevrons of warning and contempt. Tyranid carapace had been riveted across portions of his breastplate and greaves, not as decoration, but as proof of possession. A servo harness rose from his back in the shape of a predatory crown, each limb ending in clamp, drill, saw, injector, or gun. His helm was wrought like a skull behind a siege visor, its lenses burning cold red. He did not pace. He did not rant. He did not foam prayers to the dark gods. The lesser servants did that. The weak begged gods to witness them. Vol built witnesses out of meat. The command pylon shrieked in machine cant. The bound node beast convulsed. The altered Tyranid below lowered its head. For a moment, its claws stilled, its spine locked, its jaws opened and closed around a sound that could not escape the restraint hooks in its throat. Sever's upper limbs trembled with anticipation. Motor compliance achieved. Partial. The prisoners began to weep. Foal inclined his helm by a fraction. "Advance it." Sever pulsed the command. The creature took one step. The killing floor shook. It took another. A worker chained closest to it started praying to the Emperor. He did not get far. The creature turned with sudden violence, faster than its bulk should have allowed, and its claw closed over him. There was a burst of red, a wet, cracking collapse, and the man became a torn shape dragged into the beast's mouth. The restraint pylon screamed. The Tyranid thing shuddered. Its exposed brain tissue sparked as the wires burned hot. "Correction," Sever hissed. Aggression focus failed, hunger impulse resurging. The creature smashed through the first ring of chained bodies. It did not kill cleanly. It harvested in convulsions of rage and confusion, tearing prisoners apart, stamping them flat, biting through iron posts and flesh alike. Men vanished into its claws in pieces. A tech adept tried to crawl despite the bolt through his ankles, dragging shredded legs behind him while chanting an error litany until a drill claw came down and spread him across the floor in a fan of blood, wires, and powdered bone. A planetary defense trooper fired a hidden holdout pistol into the beast's face. The rounds sparked off chitin. The creature bent low, seized him in its jaws, and shook him until limbs tore free and armor plates spun away like thrown scrap. The second ring of prisoners broke into screaming. They could not flee. Their chains kept them upright for slaughter. The third ring began to sing hymns. Foal listened. The creature reached the edge of the killing floor before the pylon burned out. Sever sent a termination impulse. The nerve trunk in the command tower burst open, spraying grey fluid and sparks. The altered Tyranid jerked upright. All four main limbs spread wide. Its skull crest split. "Father." A roar came out of it at last, huge and ragged, and filled with a hatred too focused to be simple hunger. Then the explosive collars buried along its spine detonated. The blast drove chunks of chitin into the prisoners. Its head struck the floor hard enough to bend iron. Its body folded forward in stages, still twitching, still trying to rise, even as black blood poured from its ruptured spine and the furnace drains drank it down. Silence followed, except for the moans of the unbroken dying. Sever rotated toward Vol, his limbs clicking on the platform grating. Subject designation Kappa Karen failed final obedience threshold. Synaptic isolation insufficient. Pain conditioning insufficient. Warp pressure insufficient or excessive. Conclusion pending. Vol descended from the platform. His boots struck the stairs with measured weight. Each step echoed across the chamber. The surviving prisoners watched him come, too exhausted to scream, too terrified to plead properly. A worker with half his face torn away reached toward him with one hand, fingers shaking. Vol stopped before the man. "Pain remains the oldest tutor," Vol said, "but not every pupil survives the lesson." The worker tried to speak. Blood bubbled over his lips. Vol stepped on his chest and continued walking. The ribs gave way beneath the weight of ceramite and iron. The sound was small compared to the chamber, but the nearby prisoners heard it and understood. "Feed the survivors into the next generation," Vol said. Sever's head twitched. "Living or processed?" "Living. Let terror enter the nutrient slurry while it still remembers its name." The order passed through the chamber. Slave handlers came from the side corridors, vat-grown infantry in iron masks and stitched leather harness, carrying hooked poles, shock prods, and chain cutters. They were men only by ancestry. Their skin was waxy, their eyes chemical pale, their muscles overgrown by alchemical abuse. They dragged the injured from the floor. Those who could walk were driven toward the grinders. Those who could not were hooked through joints, throats, or eye sockets and hauled screaming across the iron. The nutrient machines waited at the far end of the chamber, enormous rotary mouths surrounded by prayer wheels taken from loyal shrines. The first bodies went in still begging. The grinders answered with a wet thunder that made the flesh vats tremble. Above them, the grafted host watched from gantries and bastions. Iron warriors renegades stood in motionless ranks, their armor ancient and practical, stripped of ornament except for hazard markings, kill tallies, and the trophies of sieges endured across centuries. Some had replaced damaged plates with Tyranid shell. Some wore ribbed bioarmor over ceramite like parasites fused to a fortress wall. They regarded the failed test with the bleak patience of soldiers who had seen worlds starve and cities crack under bombardment. They did not cheer. They recorded weaknesses. Below the renegades gathered the lesser host, cult troops with flayed faces hidden behind iron visors, mortal gunners wired into weapon cradles, vat infantry born in amniotic tanks and taught only obedience, weapon rights, and pain. Dark Mechanicum adepts crawling like metal spiders across the support struts. Servo skulls made from loyalist officers. Combat servitors whose arms had been replaced with biocannons torn from Tyranid organisms and bolted into shoulder rigs. Farther back, in the smoke beyond the furnace light, demon engines shifted. They were siege things, crawler bodies, cannon mouths, claws the size of cargo haulers. Their armor had been reinforced with plates of Tyranid carapace, the shell still alive in places, still twitching when the demons within growled against their bindings. One engine wore the skulls of Lehman Russ tanks around its chest like a necklace. Another had a living spore chimney grafted across its back, coughing black motes into the air. Their hatred vibrated through the floor. This was not a warband of raiders. It was a foundry of atrocities. Sever followed Vol across the killing floor, stepping delicately around the pools of blood. The process remains sound, the Magos said. Isolated Tyranid strains are severed from natural synapse through distance, surgical reduction, and psychic muffling. Pain imprinting weakens hive reflex. Warp static disrupts residual pattern loyalty. Artificial command nodes provide replacement hierarchy. Results are inconsistent, but trend toward obedience. Speak as though I am not one of your idiot apprentices. Sever's mask lowered. The beasts can be made to hear us. They cannot yet be made to prefer us. Vol stopped beside the ruined head of the test creature. One of its eyes still moved, rolling toward him. He looked down at it without anger. Preference is not required. Loyalty is not required. Love is a weakness for priests, dogs, and sons. I require function. Then the next stage demands stronger command architecture. The next stage demands better prey. Sever's lenses clicked. The Deathwatch. At that, Vol's warplate seemed to grow more still. A vox node crackled from a nearby gantry. A mortal officer knelt as his message came through, head bowed so low that his forehead touched the bloody iron. Warsmith King. Orbital augurs confirm Black Pod descent into Hive task. 6 impact signatures. Upper noble strata. Kill team configuration. Deathwatch. A murmur passed through the mortal servants. Fear, reverence, hatred. The renegades did not move, though several helm lenses turned toward Vol. The Chaos Lord looked toward the ceiling, as if he could see through kilometers of stone, metal, blood, and hive ruin to the black armored warriors descending into his works. The Emperor's finest antibodies, he said. Sever emitted a burst of machine static that might have been amusement. Shall I initiate containment defense, flood upper descent routes with gaunt forms, seal the corpse lifts, collapse the transit arteries? No. The mortal officer flinched. Fall turned slowly. Do not seal the way. Do not drown them in lesser flesh. Do not waste the lesson. The officer's throat bobbed. My lord. Open the second and third descent paths. Feed them resistance in measured increments. Cult stock first, then paired warrior strains, then a synapse-bound knot once they reach the chapel manufactoria. Record their ammunition expenditure, formation discipline, target priority, and pain tolerance. I want the Vol strain to taste elite prey without choking on it. Sever's mechadendrites twitched in approval. An experiment. A hunt, Vol said. Experiments are for those who fear poetry. The mortal officer dared to look up. And if they reach the underforge, Lord, then they are worthy of the deeper cages. And if they threaten the primary arc womb. Vol turned his gaze upon the man. The officer's courage died. His body followed a moment later, when one of Vol's servo limbs snapped forward and punched a drill through his skull. The corpse remained kneeling for several breaths, held upright by the embedded tool, feet kicking weakly against the floor. Vol withdrew the drill and let him fall. If they threaten my work, Vol said to all who listened, then my work will learn from the attempt. No one else questioned him. They crossed through a gate of ribbed iron and entered the inner laboratory. Here the failures were kept. Human subjects hung in vertical frames, their bodies opened and maintained by tubes, forced to live while feeder organisms nested within them. Some still wore factory tattoos. Some had been priests. Some had been soldiers. Their mouths formed prayers whenever consciousness returned, but the words had become wet nonsense after so many surgeries. A row of failed Astartes aspirants lined the far wall. They were huge, half-made things taken from stolen gene stock, vat-grown muscle, and implanted organs ruined by rejection, mutation, or deliberate excess. Their chests had been opened. Their secondary hearts beat in the open air. Iron nails ran through their arms, throats, and skulls, fixing them to synapse pylons where their pain served as signal amplification. One of them saw Vol pass. Lord, it whispered through torn lips, I served. You attempted to serve, Vol replied. I suffer. At last, competence. The aspirant began to sob. The pylon drank the sound and fed it into the command network. At the heart of the inner laboratory, sealed behind overlapping void shields and wards made from inverted Mechanicus scripture, waited the final chamber. Sever paused before it. Even he, in all his butcher wisdom, seemed to diminish in its presence. Primary specimen remains unstable, he said. Obedience responses exceed all prior subjects, but internal resistance persists. There is also the matter of the bound entity. The demon whispers. It does more than whisper. Everything worth mastering bites the hand. Foal approached the controls and placed his gauntlet against a gene lock made from bone, brass, and stolen Tyranid nerve matter. The chamber seals recognized his blood, his armor, his authority, and the small enslaved fragment of warp presence chained inside the mechanism. One by one, the locks opened. Steam rolled outward. The smell came with it. Hot metal, amniotic fluid, old blood, ozone, and the copper stink of psychic agony. The doors parted. The thing inside unfolded. It was a Tyranid Prime, though the title was too small for what had been done to it. Wings spread from its back, vast and membranous, their veins reinforced with black cabling and slivers of iron. Its limbs were long, bladed, and armored with grafted plates. An iron warrior's helm had been fused into its skull, not worn, not strapped, but grown through. The metal had sunk into the chitin. One red lens burned where an eye should have been. The other socket was open, filled with a small darkness that moved like smoke behind glass. Chains held it from all sides. Each chain was wrapped in warding script and hooked through its bones. Its chest rose and fell with slow, controlled breaths. Unlike the failed beast in the cathedral, this one did not thrash. It watched. It learned. Its talons flexed once, carving lines in the floor. From behind its eyes came a whisper, not made for mortal hearing. It promised hunger, it promised iron, it promised betrayal. Foal stepped close enough for the Prime to kill him if the chains failed. "Behold," he said, voice low with something almost like pride, "the first of my obedient angels." Cordain killed the priest before the borrowed voice finished echoing through the chapel. The bolt round entered through the old man's open mouth and burst somewhere behind the spine, turning the back of his skull and the altar cloth beneath him into a red fan of bone chips, grey matter, and torn devotional silk. The corpse dropped without grace. Whatever had looked through his eyes withdrew into the silence beneath the hive, leaving only the stink of blood, promethium, and the sour chemical tang of Tyranid spore. No one spoke for several breaths. The chapel manufactorum burned behind them as Kill Team Epitaph resumed its descent. Flames crawled across the prayer banners and licked the faces of machine saints. The executed survivors lay among broken pews and shell-torn reliquaries, their bodies cooling in the orange light, their faith weighed and found irrelevant. Cordain did not look back. Mercy had not entered the chamber with them, and it did not leave in their wake. They entered the corpse lift network through a maintenance reliquary whose doors had been sealed with the bones of Factorum overseers. Voss broke the lock with one blow from his thunder hammer. The gates folded inward, shrieking against their rails, and revealed a vertical shaft dropping into darkness so deep the helm lenses could not find its end. Chains thicker than battle tank barrels hung slack in the pit. Elevator platforms dangled at angles, some twisted, some missing entirely, some decorated with bodies fused into the metal by heat, pressure, or stranger arts. Rauk released an Auspex skull into the shaft. It descended 3 meters before its signal multiplied. 1 return became 6, 6 became 20, 20 became hundreds, all overlapping, all descending, all climbing, all circling in impossible patterns through the black. The skull's picked feed showed only dripping walls, old iron, dangling cables, and shapes withdrawing just beyond the narrow cone of its lumen. "Interference," Draven said. "Not interference," Rauk answered. "Mimicry. The return is being copied and displaced." Cordain stepped to the edge. "Living?" "Partly." Scaldi gave a low laugh. "That is never the answer a man wants in a hole like this." Noctis knelt beside a smear on the deck. He touched 2 fingers to it, then lifted them to his helm's sensory grill. Black fluid clung to his gauntlet, threaded with tiny metallic hairs. He said nothing. Cordain looked to him. "Report." Noctis rose. "They passed here. Not feeding, not fleeing, measuring." "Tyranid organisms do not measure," Voss said. "These do." The words settled into the vox like ash. They descended by maglock and chain, boots clamping against the shaft wall, armor scraping through grime, bolters angled down into the dark. The corpse lift groaned around them. The hive breathed through cracks in the walls, exhaling heat, rot, incense, and the wet ammoniac reek of alien growth. Far below, the war outside the hive reached them as a distant seismic chant. Basilisk guns, Lehman Russ battle cannons, collapsing manufactoria, millions of men and machines hammering at a city that had already become a carcass. The vox began to fail halfway down. First came static, then whispers, then fragments of command channels from battles that were not occurring near them. A guard officer screaming for medici support, a child reciting a machine prayer backward, a tech priest repeating the same Binharic error code until the transmission degraded into sobbing. Beneath it all came a pressure that was not sound, not thought, but the denial of both. The shadow in the warp pressed against the kill team like deep water. It dulled the edges of the mind. It crowded the soul. It made the Emperor's light feel far away, not absent, but distant behind layers of meat, hunger, and blind instinct. Draven's plasma coils brightened, psychic pressure increasing. Maintain discipline, Cordain said. I am disciplined. Then suffer in silence. They reached a transit artery that had collapsed across 3 levels of the hive. The corpse lift doors opened onto a tunnel wide enough for armored convoys, now crushed into a crooked throat of stonecrete and iron. Trains lay overturned in the gloom, their carriage windows painted black by dried blood. Bodies filled the spaces between them. Workers, enforcers, servitors, soldiers. Entire Hab clans had died here, packed together so tightly that decomposition had joined them into a single mass. In places, the dead had been tunneled through from within, their ribs broken outward, their skulls empty, their skins dried into sacks. The kill team moved through the passage with weapons raised. Noctis ranged ahead, a shadow among shadows. Twice he signaled halt without speaking. Twice the team froze while gaunt forms crawled across the ceiling far ahead, moving in disciplined pairs rather than swarming packs. They did not attack. They watched, withdrew, then reappeared behind bulkheads and broken pipes as if relaying distance. Hunters, Skaldi murmured. No, Noctis said. Scouts. Rauk's servo harness clicked softly. Their pattern spacing resembles infantry reconnaissance, observation without contact, reporting through a relay. Artificial synapse, Cordain said. Confirmed as probable. Voss's storm shield scraped against the side of an overturned carriage. Inside, rows of dead passengers sat upright, each one pierced through the skull by a slender black nail that ran into the carriage wall. Their mouths had been stitched open. As the kill team passed, air moved through the corpses and made them whisper, "Obey." Skaldi burned the carriage with a short burst of promethium. The tunnel opened into a Hab district that had been compressed by collapse until streets became trenches, and habitation blocks leaned inward like mourners over a grave. Shrine lamps still burned in some windows. From others hung chains of bodies stripped to tendon and bone. The floor was carpeted with ration wrappers, spent last packs, devotional beads, severed hands, and the flattened remains of feeder organisms crushed beneath guard boots. Then they heard las fire, not the sporadic panic fire of survivors. Volley fire, ragged, weakened, but ordered. Cordain lifted a fist. The kill team halted. Ahead, beyond a manufactorum shrine whose statue of the Omnissiah had been wrapped in razor wire and human intestines, a gatehouse blocked the district artery. Its blast doors were half closed, one side jammed open by the carcass of a chimera transport. Behind a wall of sandbags, ammunition crates, corpses, and broken machine parts, the remnants of the 143rd Mordant siege line held against the dark. They looked like men already buried. Their uniforms were ash grey, stiff with blood and chemical dust. Their helmets were dented. Their rebreathers hung cracked against hollow faces. Many had bandaged wounds gone black around the edges. Some shook so hard their rifles rattled against the barricade. Others loaded and fired with the calm of men whose minds had retreated into drill because sanity had nothing left to offer them. A commissar lay dead against the gate mechanism, bolt pistol still in hand, his lower body missing. A priest stood over him, chanting the benediction of last magazines while passing last packs to the firing line. Heavy bolters barked from 2 upper galleries, their crews stripped to the waist despite the cold, muscles jerking with exhaustion as they fed belts into weapons slick with lubricant and blood. Mortars thumped from behind the barricade, lobbing shells into the tunnel mouth beyond. The feeder beasts came endlessly. They poured from the lower transit, dark in pale waves, small chitinous things, fast and low, mouths opening like wounds full of needles. Larger gaunts bounded among them with hooked limbs and metal grafts. The guard cut them down by the hundreds. Lasgun volleys flashed in red ranks so dense they seemed like billions of burning threads stitching the darkness shut. Heavy bolters chewed through chitin, bursting bodies into wet fragments. Mortar shells ruptured brood clusters, flinging legs, claws, and organs against the tunnel walls. Still they came. The Mordant saw the Deathwatch and nearly broke from relief. "Hold the line," Cordain voxed across open channel, his voice amplified until it shook dust from the shrine walls. "Any man who turns from his firing step dies before the Xenos reaches him." That steadied them more effectively than comfort. A gaunt vaulted the barricade and landed among 3 guardsmen. It tore one open from throat to groin before the others brought it down with bayonets and rifle stocks. Another dropped from the ceiling. Noctis killed it in midfall, the stalker round punching through its skull and detonating softly inside the brain case. The corpse struck the floor at Cordain's feet. A Mordant officer stumbled toward them through the smoke. His greatcoat was torn. One arm hung useless at his side. Blood had dried black around one ear. His rank pins were missing, replaced by a strip of parchment bearing names written in cramped script. "Colonel Hest Mordain," he said, saluting with a hand missing 2 fingers. 143rd Mordant Siege Line. "We hold Gate Kappa Mortalis by order of Lord General Serican. We have held for 3 days." "Your Lord General is dead," Cordain said. The colonel's face tightened. "Then we hold by his last order." "Commendable." Mordain looked past him at the black armor, the silver arms, the weapons. Hope tried to live in his eyes, despite the ruin of his face. "My lord, with your aid, we can withdraw the wounded to the upper lifts and rejoin the outer siege line. We have maps of the mid-hive. We have seen where the beasts come from. You will hold here." The colonel hesitated. "My lord, you will increase fire. You will make noise. You will bleed visibly. The organism directing this district swarm is withholding itself. It will commit when it believes your line is collapsing." Mordain understood slowly. It was painful to watch hope die in a brave man. "You are using us as lure." "Yes. We are servants of the throne. So is bait." Scaldi made a pleased sound deep in his throat. Voss said nothing, but his shield rose a fraction. Draven turned his plasma weapon toward the tunnel. Rauk's Auspex skulls drifted outward over the guard line, scanning the bodies of the dead and the movement beyond. Mordain swallowed. To his credit, he did not beg. "How long must we hold?" "Until the synapse creature reveals itself. And then we kill it." The colonel looked back at his men. They were still firing, still dying, still chanting numbers of spent shots and heat warnings and prayers through cracked lips. He touched the parchment on his chest. "By the Emperor's grace," he said. Cordain did not answer. The Deathwatch took position within the gatehouse, like executioners selecting angles. Rauk tagged command nodes hidden among the feeder swarm. Draven waited with plasma coils building toward murderous brightness. Voss moved into the central breach. Storm shield braced, hammer held low. Scaldi climbed to a broken gallery with a heavy flamer and a chain blade, laughing softly as the next wave gathered below. Cordain opened a command rune to the Mordant Voxnet. "All squads, fire by my mark. Left gallery, suppress high approach. Mortars, shorten range. Heavy bolters, conserve no ammunition. Infantry line, fixed volleys. Do not shoot the large organism until ordered." The Mordants obeyed, because his voice left no room in the universe for disobedience. The next wave came differently. The feeder beasts broke first, but instead of flooding the gate in a mindless rush, they split to the sides under heavy bolter fire. Gaunts came through the center low and fast, using the smaller bodies as cover. Behind them, something huge moved in the dark, but always behind pillars, wreckage, and drifting smoke. "Contact shadow," Rauk said. "Synapse signature masked." "Noctis," Cordain said. "Seen." A stalker round cracked from the left darkness and struck a hidden node creature clinging to the ceiling. It fell with a wet slap, twitching, its exposed command filaments sparking black. The swarm shuddered. "Now," Cordain said. The guard line fired. The tunnel became red light. Laser guns flashed in disciplined ranks. Mortars burst among the feeder beasts. Heavy bolters roared until barrels glowed. Skuldy added promethium, washing the right approach in fire and turning the gaunts there into thrashing silhouettes. The swarm recoiled, then surged again. The synapse beast committed. A Tyranid warrior burst through the corpse smoke, larger than the one from the noble spire, its skull crest reinforced with black iron bands. Command filaments trailed from its back, like cables torn from a cathedral organ. Its 4 arms carried bone swords whose edges had been lined with metal teeth. Its ribcage bore plates marked with the chevrons of the Iron Warriors, each plate stapled into living flesh. Around it, the lesser beasts moved with renewed precision. "Mine," Voss said. He met it at the breach. The warrior struck with all 4 arms. Voss took the first 2 blows on his storm shield, the impacts ringing like siege bells. The third carved across his pauldron, cutting through black ceramite to the yellow beneath. The fourth would have punched through his gorget had he not twisted and slammed the shield forward. He did not fight like Skuldy. There was no fury in it. He fought like a wall deciding to advance. Step, brace, absorb, hammer feint, shield crush, step again. The warrior screamed, a sound layered with vox distortion and wet hatred. It struck again. Voss dropped to one knee behind his shield, letting the blade scrape sparks across the face, then drove upward with his shoulder and pinned the creature against the wrecked chimera lodged in the gate. Its lower talons gouged trenches in the floor. Its jaws snapped inches from his helm. "Draven," Voss said, voice strained but steady. The Dark Angel fired. Plasma struck the warrior in the torso and burned through grafted armor, chitin, organ, and command filament. The creature convulsed, but Voss held it in place. Draven fired again, and this time the torso opened from sternum to spine in a blast of blue-white ruin. Superheated matter sprayed across the gatehouse. A guardsman too close to the breach vanished from the waist up. Voss shoved the remains aside with his shield and crushed the twitching skull under his boot. The swarm faltered. Cordain's bolter finished the lesser node beasts with hellfire rounds, each shot placed where Rauk's target runes marked exposed synapse tissue. Noctis killed the ones trying to withdraw. Skuldy leapt down into the breach and carved the burning survivors apart in broad, savage arcs, his chain blade throwing blood and ichor across the mordant barricade. Within minutes, the assault broke. Not ended. Broke. There was a difference. The creatures withdrew in good order where they could, dragging bodies, carrying fragments, vanishing into the lower arteries with the discipline of beaten troops, preserving strength for another engagement. Rauk knelt beside the warrior corpse. His servo claws opened the skull with a precise brutality that made nearby guardsmen gag into their masks. He peeled back chitin, iron, and steaming brain tissue, then withdrew a cluster of black filaments threaded through the synaptic mass. "Confirmed," he said. "Artificial command architecture. Black iron filamentation integrated into brainstem and higher synapse tissue. Not crude implantation. Growth guided around the foreign structure." "Working?" Cordain asked. "Partially. The organism retained Tyranid adaptive response while obeying imposed battlefield direction. Vol's claim is not empty." Draven vented his plasma weapon. "Then the world is dead." "The world was dead when we arrived," said Noctis. Colonel Mordain approached through drifting smoke. His men had begun to cheer weakly, not loudly, not joyfully, but with the cracked voices of those who had expected to die and found themselves postponed. Several knelt as the Deathwatch passed. One reached for Cordain's cloak and withdrew his hand before touching it. Mordain stopped before the watch captain and bowed his head. "My lord, you have saved the regiment. The 143rd stands in your debt. Whatever strength remains to us is yours." Cordain looked at him for a long moment. Then he opened a private channel to the Oath of Oblivion and to the quarantine command net beyond. Gate Kappa Mortalis, compromised by exposure to restricted Xenos Heretek data. Surviving Astra Militarum elements have witnessed artificial synapse function and heard command references to the Vol strain. Mark the position for purgation? The colonel's eyes widened. My lord? Cordain changed to open vox. 143rd Mordant Siege Line. Remain at your posts. You have served the Emperor. Your duty is concluded. Above the gatehouse, the first orbital targeting rune blinked into life. The orbital strike came as a white line through the poisoned heavens. It did not roar until it was already done. The lance beam fell from the unseen warship above Hive Task and passed through the upper reaches of the gatehouse with the indifferent precision of a surgeon's saw. Stonecrete, adamantium plating, sandbags, men, corpses, spent ammunition, banners, bones, and the last remnant of the Mordant siege line vanished in a column of heat so pure that the air became glass around it. The blast did not scatter the regiment, it erased it. Their final cries never reached the Vox. Their weapons cooked in their hands. Their shadows remained for the smallest breath upon the walls, before the walls themselves ran molten and collapsed inward. Cordain watched the confirmation rune blink once upon his visor. Purgation complete. He turned away. Behind him, Brother Scaldy stood with one boot planted upon the skull of a feeder beast, his armor blackened by promethium soot and alien ichor. The space wolf had said nothing when the lance fell. None of them had. The guard had held. The guard had bled. The guard had heard too much. Their duty had ended where secrecy began. The Deathwatch descended again. They left the gatehouse through a maintenance artery that dropped beneath the manufactorum shrines and into the old underworks, where Karthak Secundus ceased pretending to be a city and became the thing it had always been, a machine for turning flesh into war. The passage narrowed into a service throat, ribbed with pipes and heat ducts. Steam breathed from cracks in the walls. The floor trembled beneath distant machinery. Cogitator cables hung in bundles like dead vines, their sheaths split open, their copper nerves exposed and wet with condensation. Every surface bore marks of forced alteration. Sacred Mechanicus inscriptions had been scraped away and rewritten with hooks. Aquilus had been hammered flat. Cogwheels had been inverted, broken, or fused with chitin growths that pulsed beneath thin membranes of transparent skin. The smell changed as they went lower. Above, the hive stank of smoke, burned men, and spent ammunition. Below, it stank of digestion. Rauch named it first. Biomass rendering. Scaldy's helm turned slightly. Say that again in words meant for warriors. The Heretek is feeding the hive into its brood. The passage opened into the underforge. Even through helm filters, Cordain tasted blood. The machine hall stretched beyond the range of sight, an industrial abyss once dedicated to sacred production. Its ceiling disappeared into fumes, gantries, and dangling chains. Its floor was divided by conveyor lines wide enough to carry tanks, now layered with bodies instead of ore. Human remains moved in slow procession along the belts. Workers, scitari, guardsmen, servitors, priests, nobles from the upper spires stripped of silk and rank, indistinguishable from the factory dead once hooks had taken their faces. Some were intact, many were not. The belts carried severed limbs, torsos, sacks of organs, cracked skulls still wearing augmetic implants, and slabs of meat shaved from bodies that had not died before the carving began. At intervals along the lines, industrial claws lowered from overhead rigs and sorted flesh by some blasphemous logic. Bone to grinders, muscle to slurry tanks, organs to translucent sacks, augmetics to reclamation pits, brains to suspended jars threaded with black wires and Tyranid nerve tissue. Sack towers rose between the conveyors. They were immense, living columns rooted into the forge floor and vanishing into the smoke above. Their membranes bulged and contracted as stolen biomass pumped through them. Within their walls, shapes curled and kicked. Gaunts, spore mines, things with too many limbs, things with metal jaws already fused to skulls that had not yet hardened. Each tower was crowned with Mechanicus shrine architecture torn from the old forge temples. Censers swung above them, pouring incense over amniotic slime. Servo skulls circled the growths and chanted corrupted Binharic lullabies. Draven's plasma coils lit the gloom blue. This is not infestation. This is industry. No, Rauk said. It is sacrilege wearing efficiency. They moved along the edge of a conveyor canyon. Beneath them, thousands of bodies rolled toward a digestion gate made of black iron teeth and living muscle. Men were still alive among the dead. Cordain saw hands lift weakly from the pile. He saw mouths open behind cracked rebreathers. He saw a Skitarius torso, severed at the waist, dragging itself with ruined metal fingers while reciting a damage report to no one. A feeder tendril descended, punctured his exposed spine, and locked him into a cradle beside the gate. The Skitarius convulsed as his torso became part of the mechanism. His augmetic eye turned toward the Deathwatch and blinked a warning rune until chitin grew across it. Voss raised his storm shield as something moved in the smoke ahead. Contact! The first wave came from beneath the belts. Gaunts burst upward through gaps in the conveyor grating, their bodies slick with rendering fluid. Their jaws had been replaced by grafted metal mandibles that snapped open and shut with industrial speed. Each bite threw sparks. Hellfire rounds met them mid-leap. The Deathwatch fired in controlled arcs, bolters thundering, shells punching through chitin and erupting inside alien organs. Acidic payloads devoured the creatures from within. Bodies split, limbs spasmed. Metal jaws clattered across the deck long after the skulls behind them burst. Hormogaunts followed, faster, lower, more precise. Their talons were wrong. Chainblade spurs had been grown or bolted along the cutting edges, crude teeth spinning in short bursts when the creatures struck. One skidded under Voss's shield and carved a line across his greave before he crushed it with his hammer. Another leapt at Draven, only to vanish in a sun-hot plasma discharge that painted the wall with steaming fragments. Skaldi met the densest knot at the conveyor edge. His chainblade howled through the first creature, caught in the grafted spur of the second, tore loose, and chewed through skull and spine. He kicked a third into the moving belt, where industrial hooks dragged it into the grinder along with the human dead. His flamer washed over the rest, promethium clinging to chitin, flesh, and metal. The gaunts did not scream like men. They clicked, shuddered, and kept coming while they burned, which only made Skaldi laugh harder. Good, he snarled. At least the little knife beasts remember courage. Not courage, Noctis said from the smoke. His stalker bolter coughed. A gaunt dropped with a round through its command node. Instruction. Living minds drifted down from the sack towers. They looked like swollen hearts wrapped in chitin petals, suspended by gas bladders and trailing pale tendrils. Their interiors glowed with alchemical green. Rauk's auspex marked unstable compounds, warp traces, and corrosive agents in the same instant Cordain gave the order. Down! The mines burst beneath bolter fire. The first detonation washed the hall in emerald sludge that hissed through the conveyor plating. A dead servitor dissolved to ribs and metal struts in a breath. The second blast filled the air with burning spores that crawled across armor seals, testing for weakness. Rauk released counter-agents from his harness, a silver mist that turned the spores black and dead before they found purchase. The kill team advanced through the contamination. Rauk paused at a data shrine half buried in living tissue. The shrine had once housed sealed Mechanicus archives. Now its doors were open, its locks peeled aside, its machine spirit enslaved to a wet mass of brain matter and cable. The iron hand drove a spike from his wrist into the access port. His servo harness braced him as corrupted data fought the intrusion. Report, Cordain said. Gene archives, Forge Biologia reserves, Skitari cranial pattern libraries, Xenos containment protocols. Rauk's voice dropped into something colder than anger. Fragments of Ordo Xenos research. Draven turned sharply. Impossible. Incorrect. Forbidden. Not impossible. Cordain watched the hall while Rauk worked. How much? Enough to refine synapse severance, enough to understand Tyranid reproductive acceleration, enough to make this facility more than crude butchery. Source? Sealed vault identifiers excised. Inquisitorial cipher remnants remain. No one looked at Cordain. No one needed to. Somewhere in the vast machinery of the Imperium, knowledge had leaked. Men had hidden what should have been burned. Priests had preserved what should have been shattered. The Heretek had not created this horror alone. He had merely found the bones and taught them to grow teeth. Rauk withdrew his spike. The shrine screamed as he severed its memory core. I have what can be taken. The rest is poison. Then burn it, Cordain said. Rauk placed a melter charge against the shrine and moved on. The detonation behind them turned stolen knowledge into white fire. They reached a worker level where the floor had sagged beneath the weight of flesh growth. Hab alcoves lined both sides of the passage, each packed with bodies forced upright by root-like tendrils. The dead had been mortared into the walls with resin and blood. Their faces stared outward. Some were eyeless, some still blinked. The wall breathed around them, moving in slow waves. Noctis stopped. Ambush. The wall opened. A lictor variant came out of the corpses without a sound, unfolding from among arms, ribs, and dead faces, as if it had always been part of the architecture. Its flesh was the color of old bruises. Strips of human skin hung from its chameleonic plates, carrying the heat signatures of the corpses it had hidden among. Its feeder tendrils were tipped with black iron hooks. One talon punched through Skoldy's side before the space wolf could fully turn. The impact drove him against the opposite wall. Warning runes flared across the vox. The lictor struck again, aiming for the neck seal. Skoldy caught the limb in both hands, boots grinding into the deck, snarling as the talon slid closer to his throat. Cordain fired, but the organism twisted, using Skoldy's body as cover. Noctis moved to flank. The lictor anticipated him, tail lashing out, forcing the black shield back half a pace. Adaptive predator, Rauk said. It is reading us. Then let it read this, Voss growled. The Imperial fist slammed his storm shield into the creature's exposed side. The blow crushed it against the corpse wall. Draven fired a low-intensity plasma burst past Skoldy's shoulder, burning away one of the lictor's arms and half its torso. Skoldy roared, tore the impaling talon from his side, and buried his chain blade through the thing's head. The blade jammed in chitin. He kept pushing until the skull split and its feeder tendrils whipped apart, spraying black fluid across his breastplate. Skoldy staggered once. Wound status, Cordain said. Still hateful, Skoldy answered. Useful enough. Aye. Rauk sealed the breach in Skoldy's armor with a hardening foam and a clamp that bit into ceramite and flesh. The space wolf grunted, but did not step away. The brood retains true Tyranid predatory intelligence, Rauk said. Not merely imposed command. It adapts within Vol's architecture. Then it can climb upward, Draven said. Cordain looked at the worker levels, the sac routes, the conveyor arteries, the countless routes leading back toward the hive above. Not from here. He deployed the first rad phage charge himself. The others followed his pattern. Rauk placed charges along load-bearing supports and nutrient pipes. Draven seeded promethium mines through the corpse. Wall. Noctis marked ventilation arteries. Voss hammered breach points into cracked columns and set collapse charges. Skoldy, bleeding inside his armor, laughed while he poured promethium into the feeder ducts until the vapor crawled along the ceiling like a waiting storm. There were living workers in the sealed levels beyond. Cordain heard them through the walls as the charges armed. Men calling for aid. Men begging in the Emperor's name. Men promising they were clean. He did not answer them. The Deathwatch withdrew to the primary descent shaft. Cordain gave the detonation command. The worker levels died behind them. Rad phage fire crawled through the walls in invisible waves, killing cells, spores, nerves, and whatever half-born things wriggled in the sacks. Promethium mines followed, turning corridors into furnaces. Support columns cracked, conveyor lines buckled, entire floors folded inward and dropped into the deeper machine halls, carrying bodies, beasts, shrines, workers, cultists, and stolen machinery into a collapsing grave of fire and poisoned dust. The Vox opened on its own. Static breathed. Then came a wet clicking. Then the grill of a dead tech priest, hanging from a nearby pylon, lifted toward them. His lower jaw was gone, replaced by a brass speaker crowded with pale tendrils. His skull had been opened. A little Tyranid eye peered from within the cavity, twitching as if amused. When he spoke, it was with Malrek Foal's voice. "Well done, Black Hunters. Such economy, such exquisite obedience, perfect weapons chained to a corpse." Cordain said nothing. The dead priest's body jerked. Foal continued, his voice calm, almost warm. "Do you feel pride when you burn those you came to protect? Or has your long vigil stripped even that small vanity from you? Tell me, Watch Captain, does your Emperor whisper thanks from his golden throne, or only hunger for another 1,000 souls?" Cordain still did not speak. He turned instead toward a side gallery where a line of captive cult priests had been chained to the railing. They wore flayed parchment robes and masks made from the faces of loyal clergy. Their mouths had been sewn around vox beads, their prayers feeding Vol's network. Some began to shake as Cordain approached. The dead tech priest tilted his head. "Ah!" Cordain raised his bolter. One shot. A cult priest's head burst against the railing. Another shot. Another body fell, dragging its chains taut. Another. Another. The bolter reports echoed through the underforge like a slow iron bell. Cordain spaced them deliberately, letting each corpse hit the deck before firing again. Vol heard them. The whole network heard them. No retort came through the dead priest's grill. Only static, and beneath it, the faintest scrape of something huge shifting in the depths. When the last cult priest fell, Cordain lowered the bolter and looked into the little alien eye inside the tech priest's skull. Then he crushed the skull in his gauntlet. They moved deeper. The underforge narrowed into a ribbed tunnel of resin, iron, and fused bone. The walls pulsed with stolen life. Shapes floated beneath translucent membranes. Human hands pressed outward and slid away. Astartes' battle cant flickered briefly across the Vox, too broken to be trusted, too familiar to ignore. Noctis stopped beside the right wall. His hand rose slowly. Embedded in the flesh resin was a pauldron, black ceramite, silver trim. The sigil of the Deathwatch cracked, but unmistakable. It had been pressed into the wall like a trophy, half swallowed by living matter. Around it, the resin bulged with the suggestion of a larger shape beneath, an arm, perhaps, or the remains of the warrior who had worn it. Purity seals hung from the plate, their wax melted into the tissue, their parchment strips still legible in places. Cordain stepped closer. The name etched along the inner rim was not from Kill Team Epitaph. Draven's voice came low across the Vox. Another kill team. Rauch's auspex clicked and clicked again, counting old blood, gene-wrought tissue, and the lingering trace of black armor harvested by the pit. Scaldi's wounded breath rasped in the channel. The Heretek has hunted hunters before. Cordain looked down the tunnel, into the breathing dark where the wall swallowed the remains of his unknown brother. "No," he said. "He has practiced." The pauldron did not come free. Easily. Rauch worked without reverence, because reverence had no place where utility remained. His servo claw slid beneath the black ceramite rim and cut through the resin, binding it into the wall. The flesh around the plate resisted like living muscle. It clenched. It bled. Thin cords of nerve tissue snapped one by one, each break releasing a faint tremor through the tunnel, as if the hive itself were flinching from the removal of a thorn it had swallowed. The Deathwatch sigil emerged in fragments first: silver skull, inquisitorial bar, scratches where talons had worried the surface, a gouge from something serrated, scorch marks from acid. Beneath the layers of mucus and hardened amniotic resin, the armor still held its shape. Black plate endured, oath metal endured. The brother who had worn it had not. Rauk turned the pauldron in his iron hands. Internal data wafer intact, damaged, recoverable. Cordain stood over him, bolter angled toward the breathing dark. Extract. The tunnel pulsed around them. There were shapes moving behind the translucent walls, human in outline only where humanity had not yet been consumed. The underforge rumbled with distant machinery.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Support really helps.
Somewhere below, enormous engines beat in slow, wet rhythm, like hearts the size of cathedrals. Scaldi leaned against the wall with one hand pressed to the wound in his side. The sealant clamp Rauk had fixed there kept his blood mostly inside his armor, though not all of it. Dark fluid ran down his thigh plating and steamed where it touched the warmer floor. "Another band of black brothers," he said. "How many did the iron bastard take?" "Enough to leave a warning," Draven replied. Noctis stared at the pauldron. He had not moved since Rauk cut it free. His helm lenses were dark red slits in the gloom, fixed upon the broken armor as if he could see the dead warrior still standing there. His gloved fingers rested on the hilt of his Xenophase blade. They were too still. Voss noticed. Cordain noticed. Neither spoke of it. Rauk inserted a needle cable into the pauldron's inner rim. His helm tilted as corrupted data flooded his systems. Static cracked across the squad vox. Then came a voice, broken by damage, but recognizably Astartes. Mortis Black entering final approach. Target identified as derelict bioship mass in low anchor over Nhal Ver. Auspex confirms chains. Repeat, the carcass is chained to the moon. The tunnel vanished from Cordain's display. The recording took its place. They saw through another warrior's helm. Void. Black and absolute. A corpse moon hung below, its surface a diseased grey, cratered and split by fortress trenches that glowed with forge fire. Nhal Ver. Around it drifted a dead Tyranid bioship, or what had once been one. It was vast, a curled leviathan of chitin, ribbed hull plates, spore chimneys, and frozen feeder tendrils. Great chains ran from its corpse body down into the moon's surface, each link larger than a thunderhawk, each one bolted into black iron bastions. A Chaos Fortress moon held a dead hive vessel, like a trophy animal on a butcher's hook. Mortis Black advanced through the void. They were magnificent. 5 black-armored warriors crossed the gap on thruster packs and mag lines, silver arms shining in the cold starlight, chapter pauldrons showing loyal bloodlines now bound to a single purpose. Their formation was precise enough to shame machines. One carried a frag cannon locked across his chest. Another bore twin lightning claws folded like the talons of an execution bird. A third moved with a heavy melter, its muzzle hooded until breach range. Their captain held a combi bolter and power sword, his helm crowned with a narrow iron crest. No hymns, no boasts, no wasted words. "Range," said the captain. 70 meters. "Contact." Shapes detached from the bioship's outer hull. Frozen gaunts, dormant until heat and motion woke them. Their limbs unfolded in silence. Their mouths opened without air to carry the scream. They launched themselves into the void. Mortis Black killed them before adaptation began. Bolters flashed in the dark. Each muzzle burst brief and sun-bright. Shells crossed the gap and burst inside Xenos bodies, scattering chitin, frozen ichor, and splintered limbs into space. The frag cannon fired once, and the swarm in its path became a cloud of shredded meat crystals. The melter gun burned a tunnel through a cluster of larger organisms clinging to the hull. Lightning claws caught the few that reached them, cutting through bodies that drifted apart in slow silence, claws still twitching. "Breach," said the captain. The melter specialist anchored himself to the bioship's flank with mag clamps. A shaped charge flared against chitin hardened by death and void cold. The first layer burned, the second boiled, the third screamed without lungs, as whatever remained of the bioship's nervous system remembered pain. Mortis Black entered through the wound, while molten organic armor curled away from them. Inside, the bioship was a tomb and a laboratory. Its corridors were throat tubes, ribbed and frozen. Its chambers had been cut open by Iron Warrior's machinery. Black gantries pierced organic walls. Demonic sigils burned on plates nailed into nerve clusters. Tyranid organs had been removed, catalogued, chained, and wired into machines whose purposes were obscene even before they were understood. The Deathwatch moved through zero gravity with boot clamps and discipline, firing in controlled bursts at every twitching shape that attempted to wake. A warrior in the recording spoke with satisfaction. "Resistance inadequate." "Do not insult the dead beast," the captain answered. "The danger is whoever murdered it and kept it useful." They passed through a chamber filled with suspended gene organs. The recording degraded there. Static tore the image. When it cleared, Cordain saw glass cylinders, each one marked with sigils of the Ordo Xenos, the Adeptus Mechanicus, and then symbols scraped away and overwritten by the chevrons of the Iron Warriors. Within the cylinders floated pale organs, dark nodules, neural tissue, and gene-wrought matter preserved in alchemical suspension. Not Tyranid tissue, Astartes tissue, progenoid glands, Biscopea samples, osmodular fragments, catalepsian node material, black carapace filaments. Draven's voice entered the present, cold and low. "Gene seed." In the recording, Mortis Black's captain reached the same conclusion. His voice became iron. "Mark all samples for destruction. No recovery, no debate." Then the walls opened. The creatures that came were not ready-made brood beasts. They were test answers given claws. Gaunts with reinforced jaws struck at armor seals rather than limbs. A warrior strain aimed first for the Deathwatch apothecary. A Lictor variant ignored the firing line and went for the Melter Bearer's ammunition feed. They had learned Astartes anatomy. They had learned battle roles. They had been trained on death. Mortis Black fought like the Emperor's execution made flesh. They formed a killing sphere in the weightless chamber, backs toward each other, fire lanes crossing without collision. Kraken rounds punched through chitin. Hellfire rounds burst in nerve clusters. The frag cannon turned a whole wall of crawling organisms into vaporized meat. The captain severed a warrior's skull with his power sword, kicked the body away, and shot another beast through the mouth before it reached the apothecary. But the enemy adapted, because it had already been taught where to begin. Acid struck the lightning claw veteran's elbow joint and ate through the actuator. A feeder tendril entered the damaged seam. He tore the limb off himself and kept fighting. A bioelectric spine burst against the Melter Bearer's helm and overloaded half his display. He fired blind and burned 3 organisms to ash before something behind him opened his backpack reactor with surgical precision. The explosion swallowed the chamber in white. The recording broke into fragments. A corridor full of black smoke. A Deathwatch warrior dragged backward by cables made of tendon and iron. The captain shouting, "Fall back by thirds!" An Iron Warrior's laughter over the vox. A chamber where Astartes' bodies hung opened from throat to groin, not harvested for trophies, but measured. A table of black stone where a progenoid gland pulsed inside a Tyranid larval mass. Foal's voice came through the ruined recording, calm and pleased. "You are better than mortal stock. Denser lessons, stronger meat. The swarm learns quickly when fed excellence." The last image showed Mortis Black's captain turning toward a blast door as it sealed. Beyond it, through a window of armored glass, stood Malrek Foal. The Iron Warrior raised one hand in greeting. Then the recording ended. The tunnel returned. No one spoke at first. The pauldron lay in Rauch's hand like an accusation. The iron hand withdrew his cable, then reinserted it into a deeper port, seeking secondary memory. "Additional locator embedded," he said. "Signal trace within the underforge. Close." "Alive?" Cordain asked. "Improbable." That was not the question. Rauch paused. "A biological transponder still pulses." They followed it. The path led down through a hatch made from fused rib bones and tank armor. Voss tore it open. Heat rolled up from below, thick with the stink of blood, copper, and psychic strain. Stairs descended into a chamber where the ceiling hung low and the walls were hidden beneath cables, arteries, and chains. At its center stood a throne. It had been made from synapse tissue, black iron, Astartes armor, and the bones of psychers. It rose from the floor like an altar grown in a wound. Nerve cords ran from it into pylons around the room. Each pylon held a brain suspended in amniotic gel. Some were human, some were Tyranid, some were combinations that should not have survived long enough to suffer. A space marine was fused into the throne. He was not whole. His armor had been stripped from most of his body, leaving the black carapace exposed beneath grey flesh. His arms ended at the elbows, replaced by bundles of cable driven into the throne's sides. His legs were gone. His chest had been opened and held apart by silver clamps. His hearts beat in view, one steady, one spasming around a black filament threaded through its valves. His spine had been extended by machinery into the synapse architecture behind him. A Deathwatch helm hung above his head, split down the middle like a discarded mask. His face had been left intact. That was the cruelest part. His eyes opened when Cordain approached. For a moment, there was no recognition, only pain so old it had become weather. Then the ruined warrior focused. His lips moved. The first sound was a rasp. The second carried a name. Cordain. The watch captain went still. Voss looked from the throne to his commander. "You know him." "I knew him," Cordain said. The ruined warrior tried to laugh. It became a wet cough that shook exposed organs against their clamps. "Still severe, still alive. The Emperor has poor taste in survivors." "Name," Cordain said. "Brother Captain Relion, Mortis Black." His eyes fluttered. "No, not Captain now, not brother. Architecture. I am architecture." Scaldi's breathing roughened over the vox. Draven lifted his plasma weapon, then lowered it a fraction, waiting for the order. Noctis moved closer, too close. His hand closed around his blade hilt with visible force. The Xenophase weapon hummed inside its sheath. His helm was turned toward the opened chest, the spine cables, the black carapace violated and used. Something in his silence had changed. It was no longer absence. It was rage in a sealed room. Relion saw him. "Black shield. Ah, you know cages." Noctis did not answer. "Report," Cordain said. Relion's ruined eyes returned to him. Nalvair was rehearsal. Karthak's womb. Fol does not breed beasts only for siege. He breeds answer. Mobile brood army. Ark-born. Self-replicating. Trained against us. Against the guard. Against voidcraft. Against watch station patterns. He coughed blood across his own exposed lungs. He asked us questions with knives. Every wound became data. Every death became doctrine. Rauch stepped beside the throne. His mechadendrites unfolded. There is a data spike embedded in his spinal sockets. Relion closed his eyes. "Take it," Cordain said. "It may kill you." The ruined warrior smiled with blood on his teeth. "You say that as though it is a warning." Rauch did not wait for sentiment. His servo claw locked around the base of Relion's skull, while a needle drill entered the spinal socket. The throne reacted. Cables writhed. The pylons shrieked. Relion arched as much as his nailed body allowed, teeth cracking under the force of his own bite. Noctis took one step forward, then stopped when Cordain's bolter shifted a hair toward him. "Hold," Cordain said. Rauch extracted the spike slowly, trailing nerve strands and black fluid. The ruined captain made no sound by the end. His eyes stared at Cordain, pleading now, not for rescue, not for reversal, not for hope, only for death. "Please," Relion whispered, "before he speaks through me again." Cordain raised his bolter and placed the muzzle against his former brother's brow. Duty witnessed. Relion's lips moved in something like gratitude. The shot ended him. The throne convulsed. The chamber's pylons flashed red. Brains burst inside their jars. Cables thrashed against the floor. Noctis drew his blade and slashed through the nearest living conduit, again and again, until it stopped moving. Not tactically, not efficiently, furiously. Resin, blood, and nerve fluid sprayed across his black armor. "Enough," Cordain said. Noctis froze with the blade buried in a twitching cable. For a moment, none of them knew whether he would obey. Then he withdrew the weapon and stepped back. Rauk had already inserted the extracted data spike into a sealed reader. The device projected runes across the air, corrupted and incomplete, but legible enough. Cordain read them as they formed. Arc womb maturation complete. Launch cradle active. Primary brood mass viable. Target paths projected through Imperial Crusade routes. Resupply corridors. Astropathic relays. And Deathwatch Watch Fortress supply lines. Dispersal countdown active. Rauk's voice was flat. "The Ark ship is beneath us." "How long?" Draven asked. The runes shifted. 6 hours. From somewhere below the chamber came the deep, slow thunder of something alive beginning to wake. 6 hours was not time. It was a wound measured in heartbeats. It was the space between a blade touching skin and the cut opening. It was less than the Imperium usually spent deciding which priesthood held authority over a dead manufactorum, yet now it was all that remained before Malrek Fol's living ark clawed its way from beneath Karthak Secundus and carried his obedient hunger into the stars. The war above them changed when the ark began to stir. Hive Task answered first. Its lower districts split open in long, jagged fractures, and from those wounds the Vol strain poured into the ash wastes. They came not as the first feeder beasts had come, not as a mindless tide of claws driven only by appetite, but as an army learning the shape of war as it waged it. Pale gaunts flooded trenches and culverts, their metal jaws clicking in unison. Hormogaunts with chain-blade spurs ran beneath the smoke in low, disciplined packs. Larger warrior forms moved behind them, directing, correcting, withdrawing broods from wasteful fire and sending them through gaps no beast should have understood existed. Spore mines drifted on the furnace winds, their swollen bodies glowing with warp sludge and alchemical venom. The ash wastes around Hive Task became a killing field beyond mortal comprehension. The Astra Militarum had come to Carthax in numbers worthy of the Emperor's infinite hunger for war. Regiments stretched across the horizon in ranks of grey, black, brown, and dust-stained green. Infantry columns marched through ash that came to their knees. Priests walked among them with censers and shotguns, blessing barrels and condemning fear. Commissars rode in command chimeras, or stood on trench parapets with bolt pistols drawn, their coats snapping in the hot wind. Medici stations overflowed before the first full assault had even begun. Servitors carried ammunition crates until their legs failed, and they were pushed into the mud of ash and blood to serve as footing for the next wave. Behind the infantry, the guns spoke. Basilisk batteries fired until the ground beneath their stabilizers cracked. Earthshaker shells passed overhead in endless shrieking processions, falling upon Hive Task's lower approaches like the judgment of a dead god. Manticores loosed storms of rockets into the red murk. Wyverns hammered trench mouths and tunnel breaches with fragmentation storms. Heavy mortar companies set their tubes in ordered ranks and turned whole districts of the battlefield into fountains of pulverized chitin and human meat. Farther back, under sheets of camo netting blackened by falling ash, Deathstrike missile crews completed the sacred checks of their apocalyptic charges, every action watched by tech priests who chanted with voices stripped of comfort. The armor went forward under that thunder. Lehman Russ squadrons advanced in wedges through clouds of chemical smoke, battle cannons booming, hull cannons cutting lines of red fury across the dark. Demolisher variants crawled closer to the hive gates, their short barrels vomiting city-killing shells into bastions already softened by orbital fire. Hellhounds poured promethium into drainage mouths and watched the flames come back out, carrying burning things with too many limbs. Baneblade super heavies moved like fortresses through the press of men, their tracks crushing corpses and wounded alike because the war had no room left for those too slow to rise. The Guard were not demigods. They died by the thousand in the opening breaths. They died screaming beneath the claws. They died when spore mines burst and filled their lungs with acid. They died when the ash beneath their boots opened and feeder organisms came up through their bodies. They died holding lasguns so hot the casing burned their palms. They died because a priest told them the emperor was watching and a commissar promised to shoot any man who doubted it. They died in lines, in squads, in companies, in regiments. They died with orders in their ears and no understanding in their eyes. And still, they advanced. That was the horror of mankind, not its courage, not its nobility, its scale, its willingness to spend men as ammunition and call the expenditure faith. From the depths below Hive Task, Kill Team Epitaph watched the surface war through broken auger relays, stolen pict feeds, and the orbital eyes of the Oath of Oblivion. The images played across their helm displays in fragmented bursts, while they moved through a service artery beneath the underforge, each warrior descending toward the heat pulse that marked the arc womb. Cordain saw an infantry wave vanish beneath a wash of bioacid. He saw a Lehman Russ dragged nose first into a sinkhole by hooked limbs, its battle cannon firing once into the sky before the tank disappeared under the ash. He saw a command chimera struck by a burrowing organism that erupted beneath it and split the vehicle open from below. Officers tumbled out burning. The Vol strain ignored the riflemen and went for the men with aerials, banners, and command vox packs. It killed the voices of the army first. Battlefield prioritization confirmed, Raug said. Enemy is targeting command structure, ammunition reserves, artillery crews, and armor mobility. Not instinctive feeding, directed interdiction. Fall is using the surface as a delay screen, Draven said. He does not need victory there. No, Cordain said. He needs time. Scaldi's breathing rasped. The wound in his side had worsened during the descent, though he would have bitten through his own tongue before naming it weakness. Then take time from him. Cordain opened the command link to the strike cruiser. Static clawed at the transmission before the ship's machine spirits crushed it beneath ciphered authority. Oath of Oblivion, fire mission. A naval voice answered through the distortion. Ready to receive, Watch Captain. Cordain blinked coordinates across the link. They were deep inside the battlefront, where guard formations had become entangled with Vol-strain broods near the outer trenches of the ash gates. Thousands of Imperial soldiers still fought there. Their transponders blinked in clusters, blue runes among red enemy heat signatures. Voss saw the target spread on his own display. Those are Imperial positions. They are compromised by encirclement. They are still firing. They are fixing the enemy in place. Voss's voice lowered until only the kill team channel carried it. This is waste. Cordain kept moving. Clarify. Not mercy, not sentiment. Waste. Those regiments still hold line cohesion. Their artillery observers remain active. Their sacrifice now gains minutes. Proper extraction or redirection gains hours. There is no extraction. Redirection requires command channels the enemy is already severing. The brood concentration must be slowed before it reaches the artillery park. Then we burn our own blade to warm our hands. Cordain stopped at the edge of a descending shaft, ribbed with black resin. His red lenses turned toward the Imperial fist. Survival is not the mission. Containment is. Voss held his gaze for a breath. Then his hammer shifted in his grip. Understood. Cordain sent the confirmation rune. Above, the Oath of Oblivion fired. The strike cruiser's macro batteries did not have the elegance of a lance. They were brutal instruments, city-breaking. Shells hurled from the void with sacred calculation. They fell through ash cloud as burning meteors, punching down upon the Ashgate approaches, where Guard and Xenos were locked together in slaughter. The first impact lifted a whole trench line into the air. Men, gaunts, sandbags, heavy bolters, prayer poles, limbs, chitin plates, and armor fragments rose in one blooming wall of fire and dust. The second shell struck behind it and turned an ammunition dump into a second sun. The third collapsed the forward causeway, burying 3 infantry battalions and an entire brood pack beneath molten stonecrete. The Vox filled with human screaming. Cordain muted it. "Enemy advance delayed," Rauk said after several seconds. "Imperial loss severe. Tactical effect satisfactory." Voss said nothing. On the surface, Inquisitor Vare watched the same firestorm from the strategium of the Oath of Oblivion and authorized more. "Macro shell hive tasks lower districts," he said. The shipmaster turned from the display pit. "My lord, guard forward elements remain within the collapse radius. Vox traffic indicates several divisions are inside the lower hab approaches." "Accepted. Mechanicus assets have marked sacred generatoriums beneath those districts." "Accepted. Projected civilian remnants may exceed several million." Vare's face did not change. "Accepted." The shipmaster bowed because there was nothing else a sane man could do in the presence of such authority. The orbital batteries spoke again. Hive Task's lower body disappeared beneath successive impacts. Macro shells caved in worker districts, manufacturing bridges, shrine stacks, hab levels, transit arteries, hospitals, ammunition depots, refugee pens, brood nests, and guard strongpoints alike. Fire moved through the hive in waves. Entire blocks dropped into the levels below. Airburst detonations flayed exposed streets clean. The sound reached even the underforge as a rolling pressure through stone and metal, a planetary drumbeat of sanctioned murder. But the Vol strain did not break. It learned in the fire. Broods began tunneling beneath the artillery impact zones rather than through them. Feeder swarms flooded shell craters and used them as covered approach routes. Winged things, small and fast, emerged from smoke banks and struck command Vox masts, dragging operators screaming into the air before dropping them among the gaunts below. A death strike preparation site vanished when burrowers came up beneath the launch cradle and pulled the sacred missile down into the earth before its machine spirit could be awakened. The resulting detonation did not launch. It bloomed sideways beneath the ash, turning 1/2 kilometer of battlefield into a crater of glass, boiling mud, and cooked flesh. A Baneblade named his unbroken word, fired every weapon until the ash around it became a storm of shell casings and severed limbs. Then the ground beneath its left tracks opened. Hooked tendrils coiled around its road wheels. The engine roared. The crew tried to reverse. A bio-siege organism buried beneath the ash pulled. Slowly, impossibly, the super heavy tilted. Men around it ran. Some were crushed under the tracks. Others were caught by gaunts waiting in the smoke. The Baneblade's main cannon fired one final time as the tank rolled into the sinkhole, its shell passing through 3 spore towers and bursting against the hive wall. Then the ash swallowed it, and the Vox carried the crew singing the hymn of iron hulls until something entered through the lower hatches and the song became wet choking. At the ash gates, the front folded. The gates themselves had once been the western throat of Hive Task, immense adamantine portals through which ore caravans and military convoys had passed for centuries. Now they were cracked open by internal sabotage, their faces covered in burned prayer strips, black resin, and the bodies of men nailed into warning sigils. Guard forces had spent hours trying to seal the breach with armor artillery, and corpses. The colossal bio-siege beast came through just as the third assault wave reached the gate. It broke the world around it. Its head emerged first, a blunt battering skull plated in chitin and iron, with siege hooks grown along its jaws and cannon mouths pulsing in its throat. Its shoulders tore both gate leaves wider as it forced itself into the open, bringing down towers and defensive galleries in avalanches of stone and steel. It was larger than a hab block, its back crowded with spore chimneys and parasite sacs. Chains hung from its flanks, not binding it, but dragging broken demon engine parts that had fused into its body. Iron warriors' chevrons had been burned into its carapace. Beneath them, the shell moved as if things were crawling inside. The guard fired everything: battle cannons, lascannons, heavy bolters, melter beams from suicidal infantry teams, basilisk shells dropping dangerously close, plasma from command sentinels, hunter-killer missiles, crack warheads. The beast came on through all of it. Shells burst against its skull. Chunks of carapace blew away, revealing meat and metal and more chitin beneath. It lowered its head and vomited. Not acid. Life. A flood of organisms poured from its throat and belly, spilling into the guard rear lines in a steaming wave. Gaunts, feeder beasts, spore cysts, crawling mines, blade-limbed things born slick and already killing. They fell among artillery crews, medici tents, ammunition haulers, command posts, and reserve infantry who had thought the front was still in front of them. The rear became the front in a single breath. Men died without lifting their weapons. Priests were dragged from pulpits built atop supply crates. Commissars shot their own panicking troops until gaunts took them from behind. Artillery crews tried to depress guns, never meant for close assault, and were butchered around the breaches. A battery of basilisks fired point-blank into the beast's chest and killed thousands of men, along with whatever flesh they tore away. The creature kept vomiting. The ash gate line collapsed inward, not routed. The guard did not have enough space left to rout. It folded, regiment into regiment, tank into trench, artillery into infantry, command into panic. Orders contradicted orders. Vox channels drowned beneath screams, Binharic failure cant, and the wet clicking pulse of the Vol strain's artificial synapse. Far below, the tremor reached Kill Team Epitaph as they crossed a bridge of bone and iron over a digestion canal. The liquid beneath them was full of faces, turning slowly in the current. Rauk stopped. "What?" Cordain asked. The iron hand extended 3 mechadendrites into the air. Their sensor tips trembled. Seismic pattern shift, not shelling, not collapse. The floor pulsed. Once, again, a third time, deeper than the first 2. Draven looked down through the bridge grating. The arc. The pulse came again, and this time every wall around them answered. Resin tightened. Cables jerked. Distant engines began to turn beneath the crust, not with the clank and roar of Imperial machinery, but with the wet thunder of organs waking from forced sleep. The whole underforge seemed to inhale. From far below came a sound like continent-sized hearts beating under stone. Cordain checked the countdown rune. Less than 6 hours remained, and the world above had begun to die faster. The path into the deepest level did not open. It was cut. Voss broke the first gate with his thunderhammer, not by smashing wildly, but by striking the same point 3 times with the patience of a siege master. The first blow cracked the black resin layered over the adamantium. The second folded the inner braces inward and made the living tissue behind them scream through a dozen stolen throats. The third drove the gate from its sockets and sent it crashing down the descending passage beyond, crushing something soft and many-limbed beneath its weight. The sound echoed for too long. Kill Team Epitaph entered the wound. The Synapse Cathedral waited beneath Hive Task, like an inverted fortress driven into the planet's bones. Its towers hung downward from the ceiling, black iron spires descending into the abyss instead of reaching for heaven. buttresses made from Tyranid nerve trunks wrapped around siege plating. Demon script crawled across the walls in slow, burning lines. Cables thicker than men pulsed with borrowed thought. The floor was not floor, but layered plates of metal bolted over living tissue, and every step drew a faint tremor from the structure beneath them. The place had been built to command, not worship, not manufacture, command. Every archway was a throat, every pillar was a spine, every chamber fed into the next by cables, nerves, prayer wires and pipes filled with black amniotic fluid. The air was hot and wet, and alive with static. Cordain's helm display tried to map the passage ahead and returned 3 different layouts in the same breath. One showed a straight corridor, one showed a spiral descent, one showed a circular chamber full of bodies where no chamber existed. Rauch's Auspex skull drifted ahead. It vanished. Its signal remained, then became 5 signals, then 12, then 100, flickering in impossible locations beyond walls, beneath the floor, inside the armor of the kill team itself. Each return pulsed with the same ident rune, as if the skull had been copied by something that understood identification, but not truth. Auspex ghosts, Rauch said. The cathedral is fabricating returns. Blind fighting protocol, Cordain ordered. The kill team obeyed. Vision narrowed. Reliance shifted. Heat signatures became secondary. Sound mapping, pressure shifts, motion disturbance, scent analysis, armor spirit intuition, and old warrior instinct took precedence. Noctis moved first, silent despite the weight of his plate. Voss followed with shield raised. Cordain held the center. Draven's plasma weapon glowed like a caged dawn. Skaldi came limping but eager, chainblade idling in a low growl. Rauch marked every step with machine hatred. The first chamber bled when they entered it. Not metaphor, not seepage from cracked pipes. The walls opened in slits as their boots crossed the threshold, and blood ran down in sudden curtains, thick and dark, steaming where it touched the iron grating. Faces surfaced within the walls as the fluid poured. Human faces, Skitari masks, half-formed Tyranid skulls. Their mouths moved in unison around false Vox transmissions. "Watch Captain Cordain," one of them said in Colonel Mordain's voice. "The 143rd still holds. Withdraw orbital fire." Cordain shot the face. It burst inward, and the wall convulsed. Another spoke in Relion's voice. "Brother, you left me on the throne." Cordain shot that one too. More voices rose. The dead, the executed, the bait, the burned, men from the gatehouse, priests from the chapel, Astartes from Mortis Black, all of them speaking through the cathedral's wet architecture, all of them trying to find a seam in discipline, guilt, memory, or wrath. "False Vox," Draven said. "Temptation is irrelevant," Cordain replied. "Advance." The chamber fought them. Tendrils snapped from beneath the grating and wrapped around Voss's legs. He planted his shield and brought the hammer down, crushing the tendrils into ropes of pulped meat. A hatch in the ceiling opened and dropped feeder organisms onto Skaldi. He caught the first in one gauntlet and tore it in half, then bathed the rest in promethium until burning things rolled across the floor and thrashed against the walls. Noctis fired twice into a shadowed alcove before anything emerged. 2 bodies fell out, gaunt forms with black iron nodes drilled through their skulls. The deeper they went, the less the cathedral resembled a place, and the more it resembled a thought. A hateful thought, a strategic thought, a thought made from hunger and chained pain. They cleared the second chamber with bolter fire and disciplined movement. Cult shock troops waited there, mortal bodies swollen by combat drugs and Xeno's grafts, their faces hidden behind iron masks stamped with chevrons. They did not charge like zealots. They advanced behind slab shields grown from chitin and riveted metal, firing autoguns and needle weapons from murder slits, while gaunts crawled between their legs. It was siege order: suppression, advance, pressure, overwhelm. The Deathwatch answered with annihilation. Cordain's hellfire rounds detonated behind shields, filling the protected ranks with acid and mutagenic ruin. Noctis placed stalker shots into eye lenses and exposed throat seams. Draven's plasma washed the left line into blue-white silhouettes that existed for less than a breath before collapsing into ash and liquefied armor. Voss crossed the center under fire, shield ringing beneath impacts, and struck the nearest slab-bearer with his hammer. The blow folded shield, armor, ribs, and spine into a single inward ruin. Scaldi drove through the gap, chain blades snarling, ripping masks from faces and faces from skulls in the same motion. Rauk moved last, laying small black charges on the walls. Machine hexagrammic countermeasures prepared, he said. Null. Shock sequence available. Hold until synapse confirmation, Cordain said. Confirmed threat is already surrounding us. Hold. They entered the third chamber and found the choir. It filled the vast downward hollow of the cathedral's heart. Captured psychers hung in iron cages, their skulls shaved and opened, their brains threaded into cables that descended into vats of Tyranid synapse tissue. Their mouths had been nailed open with silver hooks. Some were still alive enough to sob. Others twitched in time with the pulsing nerves around them. Beneath them, synapse beasts had been reduced to torsos and spinal masses, suspended in black amniotic fluid, their crested skulls clamped open and wired into demon engines chained around the chamber's perimeter. The engines were awake. Not fully. Not yet. They crouched in their iron stalls like nightmares under restraint, furnace eyes glowing behind plated masks. Defiler-like crawlers, flesh-metal artillery beasts, hell brutes with their sarcophagi cracked and packed with feeder organisms that crawled in and out of the imprisoned pilots' ruined bodies. Each engine was chained to the choir by cables of nerve and brass. Each demon within snarled against the Tyranid thought pressing through it. Each psyker screamed enough for all of them. This was the command web, not a device, an atrocity made into a mind. Draven lifted his plasma weapon. By the lion! Target the cages, Cordain said. A shape drifted from behind the upper choir. It was a zoanthrope variant, but altered, elongated, and crowned with black iron. Its body hung in the air without wings, its swollen skull bound in bands of demon-etched metal. Exposed brain matter pulsed beneath translucent plates. Human hands had been stitched along its lower body like prayer tassels, each one twitching in stolen supplication. Its eyes opened, and the pressure in the chamber became a physical thing. The shadow in the warp surged. Cordain's vision narrowed to a red tunnel. Warning runes burst across his display and died. His heart kicked once out of rhythm, then corrected. Scaldi snarled and staggered. Voss drove his shield into the floor and leaned behind it as if bracing against artillery. The psychic blast struck Draven full in the helm. His display overloaded into white fire. His armor seals screamed. Blood boiled beneath the inner lining of his gorget and pooled inside the collar. He dropped to one knee, plasma weapon slipping from his grip as steam vented through the joints of his plate. The Dark Angel made no sound, but the Vox carried the wet crackle of his own flesh, cooking where the pressure forced heat through the suit's systems. Draven, Cordain snapped. No answer. The zoanthrope thing turned its swollen head toward him again. Rauk deployed the null shock charges. He did not throw them. His servo harness fired them into the floor, walls, and choir pylons with piston force. The devices bit into iron and nerve tissue, unfolded silver veins, and released a pulse that had no sound, but made every living thing in the chamber recoil. Machine hexagrammic countermeasures followed, projected from Rauk's harness in hard angular patterns of light and static, sacred geometry weaponized against warp, synapse, and blasphemous computation. The artificial synapse web stuttered. For one precious moment, the choir lost its voice. The zoanthrope variant dropped 1/2 meter from the air. Cordain and Noctis fired together. Hellfire rounds and stalker shells punched into its skull, bursting through iron bands, nerve tissue, and swollen psychic organs. Draven, still on one knee, forced his plasma weapon back into line with a gauntlet that shook from nerve shock. He fired. The creature became a blue sun. Its death threw psychic backlash through the chamber. Psyker cages burst. Synapse vats cracked. Demon engines roared as their chains went slack and then tightened again. The kill team moved before the enemy recovered. Cordain shot the nearest Psyker cage until the body inside was no longer a channel. Noctis severed cables with his Xenophase blade, each cut passing through matter that should have resisted physics. Voss smashed a synapse vat apart and crushed the blind beast inside with 2 hammer blows. Scaldi burned the hanging nerve curtains, laughing through pain while they curled and screamed. Rauk placed another null charge directly into a demon engine's exposed command socket and left it shrieking in binary agony. Then Malrek Vol appeared, not in flesh, not yet. A hololithic projection formed above the choir pit, large enough to stand over them all. The image flickered through smoke and psychic distortion, but the Chaos Lord's presence lost none of its weight. Iron plate, hazard stripes, servo limbs like a crown of butcher tools, red lenses burning with calm amusement. "Cordain," Vol said, "you have reached the throat of my cathedral. Admirable. Predictable, but admirable." Cordain reloaded. "Show flesh or be silent." Still mistaking patience for absence, "I am present in every scream around you." Draven forced himself upright. Blood leaked from beneath his helm seal and smoked against his chest plate. "Projection source masked." Rauk's voice was colder than usual. "Multiple relays, organic and demonic. He is distributed through the choir." Vol turned his helm toward the iron hand. "Ah, the machine cripple understands. Tell me, son of Medusa, does your hatred taste different when you know the mechanism is elegant?" Rauk raised his weapon and fired. The projection distorted, then reformed. Vol continued, unhurried. "The Imperium wastes humanity. It stacks men in trenches, burns worlds to hide fear, feeds its god with souls, and calls the process survival. Chaos wastes ambition. So many warlords kneel to hungering things and mistake slavery for ascension. The hive mind wastes perfection. It devours all variation into one blind appetite, 3 empires of squandered potential." Cordain advanced one step. "You are not a philosopher. You are a disease with a voice." Vol's projected head tilted slightly. "Disease adapts. Empires rot. We shall see which of us is more honest." The counterattack began before the projection faded. Iron warriors entered through 3 lower gates in corrupted plate, moving in heavy phalanx formation behind siege shields. Their armor was old, patched, brutal, painted in iron grey and black-yellow warning stripes. They carried bolters, combi melters, chain axes, and heavy weapons braced against corrupted servo frames. Between their ranks advanced cult shock troops with slab shields, and around their boots crawled Tyranid organisms, moving in perfect synchronization with the traitor formation. It was wrong in a way that made even the Deathwatch pause for less than a breath. Heretic Astartes and Tyranid beasts advanced together like parts of the same war engine. The Iron Warriors opened fire. Bolt shells slammed into Voss's shield. Heavy rounds tore chunks from the pillars. A combi melter beam cut through a hanging cage and turned the Psyker inside into steam. Cult troops fired through the shield line while gaunts ran beneath their covering fire. Warrior forms moved at the flanks, herding the smaller organisms away from Deathwatch kill zones. "Siege pattern," Voss said. "Break it," Cordain replied. The chamber became a slaughterhouse of disciplined monsters. Cordain fired Kraken rounds into traitor helm lenses and neck seals, each shot placed with absolute economy. One Iron Warrior's head snapped back, eye lens exploding outward. Another took 3 rounds through the gorget and fell choking on blood inside his helm. Draven, half cooked in his armor, turned the plasma incinerator upon the shield line. The first blast turned a corrupted Astartes into a blue-white ghost. The second burned through 2 cult ranks and a Tyranid warrior behind them. Heat haze rippled around him as he kept firing beyond safe tolerance. Voss met the first traitor to breach the center. The Iron Warrior swung a chain axe two-handed. Voss caught it on the storm shield, drove forward, and struck with the thunder hammer at close range. The blow folded the traitor's breastplate inward, crushing ceramite, ribs, hearts, and reactor harness in one catastrophic impact. The body flew backward into the phalanx and knocked 2 more warriors off balance. Scaldi exploited the gap, throwing himself into the cult troops with flamer and blade. He burned men until their masks fused to their skulls, then cut down the ones who tried to crawl through the fire. Rauk's servo harness fought like a separate creature. One limb fired into a gaunt knot. Another clamped around a cultist's head and crushed it to pulp. A third drove a melter cutter through an Iron Warrior's knee, dropping him low enough for Rauk to place a bolter round into the exposed underside of his helm. Noctis vanished into the right flank. Cordain tracked his rune for 3 seconds, then lost it. The cathedral shifted. A living wall burst between Noctis and the rest of the team, rising from the floor in a convulsion of black resin, bone, and cable. Voss turned to smash through it, but a hellbrute awakened in its stall and tore free, forcing him back beneath a storm of autocannon fire. Cordain called Noctis over the vox. Static answered. Then Vol's voice, close and intimate, entered the Black Shield's private channel. Not the squad link. Private. Do they know, little oathless one? Noctis stood alone in a corridor that had not existed a moment before. The walls were lined with black armor fragments. Some were Deathwatch, some were older. Some bore heraldry scraped away until only shame remained. The hololithic image of Malrek Vol formed ahead of him, smaller now, almost companionable. I know the shape of hidden sins, the Chaos Lord said. I know the heraldry beneath your black paint. I know what your chapter did before the Inquisition gave you a new grave to stand in. Noctis raised his Xenophase blade. Vol laughed softly. Come then, let us speak of the dead name you buried. Noctis did not answer the dead name. He walked toward the hololithic image of Malrek Vol, with his stalker bolter raised and his Xenophase blade low at his side. The corridor around him seemed to have been grown from confession and punishment. Black armor plates lined the walls like memorial stones, some bearing the silver arm of the Deathwatch, others older, stripped of heraldry, scraped until the wounds in the ceramite were deeper than paint. Between the plates, flesh breathed. Cables crawled beneath transparent membranes. Eyes opened in the resin and watched him pass. Vol's projection stood at the far end, immense even as light, hands folded behind his back in mockery of patience. You were not born oathless, the Chaos Lord said. No Black Shield is. Each of you is a grave with legs. Each of you paints over the past and calls the lie service. Noctis fired. The stalker round passed through the projection and struck the wall beyond. Something inside the resin burst. A hidden node popped like a rotten fruit, spraying nerve fluid across the armor plates. Vol's image flickered, reformed, and laughed softly. Good. Denial with ammunition, the most honest prayer of the Adeptus Astartes. Noctis moved before the laugh ended. The first lictor thing came from above, unfolding from the ceiling with strips of Deathwatch armor tied into its chameleonic flesh. A cracked vambrace hung from one shoulder. A purity seal had been stapled through the membrane of its throat. It dropped without sound, talons spread for the neck seal. Noctis stepped aside by less than the width of a blade. His Xenophase sword rose, passed through chitin, muscle, and the iron hook embedded beneath, and the creature landed in 2 separate pieces behind him. It thrashed without blood for a breath, then spilled itself across the floor in twitching loops. Noctis did not look back. A second came from the wall, wearing the broken fingers of a Deathwatch gauntlet around its feeder tendrils. He shot it through the open mouth before it fully emerged. The round detonated inside the skull. Its head collapsed inward, and the body struck the floor in a knot of limbs. A third did not attack. It watched from the shadows ahead, half hidden among hanging cables, its skin shifting through black, grey, and bone white. Across its back had been nailed a cracked pauldron marked with the Inquisition's skull. Its claws flexed in slow recognition. Not animal, not beast. A hunter measuring another hunter. Noctis walked toward it. The lictor withdrew. Foal's voice followed through the walls, not from the projection now, from the mouths in the resin, from dead vox grills, from armor plates whose internal speakers should have been silent forever. "Your chapter died badly," he said. "Not in glory, not under banners, not in some last wall against the devourer. It was declared unclean. Excommunicate traitoris. Do you remember the wording, Noctis? Do you remember the seal pressed into the order that damned your brothers?" Noctis fired into a speaking mouth set in the wall. Teeth and black fluid burst outward. Another mouth opened beside it. "The Inquisition did not save you. It kept you. There is a difference. You were useful because you had nowhere left to stand. No homeworld, no chap to keep, no brothers whose names you may speak. They gave you black armor because black hide stains." The lictor with the pauldron attacked from behind. Noctis dropped low before the talons reached him. One claw scraped sparks from his backpack casing. He twisted, drove the Xenophase blade backward under his own arm, and felt it pass through a rib mass and something harder, a grafted strip of ceramite. The creature jerked away, wounded but not dead. It clung to the wall, feeder tendrils writhing around the stolen pauldron. Noctis shot the pauldron. The shell punched through the Deathwatch sigil and exploded beneath it, blowing the lictor from the wall in a spray of shell fragments and torn chitin. It landed on its back. Noctis placed one boot on its throat, looked down at the stolen armor embedded in its flesh, and drove the blade through its skull. "Not yours," he said. Those were the first words he had spoken since being separated. The corridor shuddered around him. Far behind, the rest of Kill Team Epitaph fought through a cathedral that had decided to become a fortress. Cordain led them into a chamber shaped like a lung, its walls swelling and collapsing with each pulse from the arc buried below. Iron warriors held the far arch behind overlapping siege shields. Cult shock troops knelt before them, using their own bodies as cover and ammunition rests. Tyranid gaunts crawled through channels cut into the floor, emerging between volleys to strike at ankles, weapon cables, and armor seals. The Deathwatch were no longer moving through battle untouched. Their ammunition counters bled toward emptiness. Their armor was cracked, scorched, and scored by acid. Draven's helm seal still smoked from the psychic blast. Voss's storm shield had 3 deep grooves across its face, one of them bitten almost through the outer layer. Cordain's left pauldron was split across the rim, silver arm blackened by burns. Rauk's servo harness had lost one limb entirely, sheared away by a traitor's chain axe. Scaldi limped with every stride, blood and sealant leaking from the wound in his side. They advanced anyway. Cordain's bolter cracked with deliberate economy. Every shot killed something vital. A cult officer's skull burst through the back of his iron mask. A gaunt command node split and sprayed black filaments. An iron warrior's exposed elbow joint shattered, and Voss finished him by driving the thunderhammer down onto the traitor's helm. The blow folded the skull into the chest cavity and drove the corpse to its knees like a penitent before it toppled. "Left channel," Rauk warned. Gaunts flooded from the groove at their flank, too many for bolter fire, their metal jaws snapping in synchronized rhythm. Scaldi turned toward them, flamer raised. The weapon coughed, spat, and died empty. The space wolf looked at the pack of organisms rushing him. Then he laughed. "Come then." They hit him as a wave. He vanished beneath pale bodies, claws, teeth, and chainblade spurs. His chainblade roared once, then choked on meat. Warning runes flashed across the squad link. Scaldi's armor buckled beneath impacts. A talon punched into his thigh. Another scraped across his helm lenses. He reached back, tore the remaining Prometheum tanks from his harness, and drove them into the mass at his feet. "Scaldi," Cordain said. "For the Watch," the Space Wolf snarled, "and for Fenris." He detonated the tanks at point-blank range. The explosion filled the left channel with white-orange fire. Gaunts vanished. Cult troops screamed as promethium sprayed across them in liquid sheets. The lung chamber contracted as flame crawled over its living walls. Scaldi was hurled backward, trailing fire, his armor burning from the inside, where ruptured feeds had driven heat through damaged seals. He struck the floor hard enough to crack the plating and lay still for a breath too long. Then, one blackened gauntlet moved. "Still hateful," he rasped. Cordain stepped over burning alien bodies and kept firing. "Remain so." Draven's plasma weapon began to scream. The coil glow shifted from blue to white. Warning sigils cascaded across the squad display. The Dark Angel was firing beyond tolerances, each shot turning traitor armor into incandescent vapor, each vent cycle shorter than the last. A final Iron Warrior braced a heavy bolter and opened fire into him. Rounds hammered Draven's breastplate, punching splinters of ceramite from the surface. Draven did not fall. He fired. The plasma blast burned the traitor into a silhouette and carved a molten trench through the wall behind him. The incinerator overheated. "Venting failure," Rauk said. "Release the weapon." "No." Draven locked the weapon against his hip with one arm and drove his other gauntlet into the manual vent assembly. The casing burst. Superheated plasma exhaust washed over his hand. The ceramite blackened, then split. Flesh beneath cooked and sloughed from the bone. His fingers fused around the mechanism as he tore it open by force. The weapon vented in a shriek of caged starfire. Draven's left gauntlet dropped away in pieces, trailing smoke and strips of burned meat. He shifted the weapon to his remaining grip and fired again. "Operational," he said. Voss said, "You are wounded." "Correct." Nothing more. They moved on through the chamber's burning throat, leaving the dead and half-dead to be crushed when Rauk's charges collapsed the arch behind them. Noctis heard the detonation as a dull tremor through the walls. He had reached a descent well that spiraled around a column of exposed nerve tissue. The lictor things no longer attacked one at a time. They stalked him as a pack, always at the edges of sight, always wearing fragments of black armor as if the dead Deathwatch had been reduced to camouflage. He killed them without flourish. A stalker round through a cranial node. A blade cut through a talon before it struck. A boot crushing a feeder tendril against the floor before the creature could taste his blood. No speeches, no rage spent where motion was needed. Foal spoke again. "Do you serve the Emperor, Black Shield, or do you merely seek a death useful enough to drown memory?" Noctis descended. "You have not told them the name of your chapter. You have not told them why the Ordo Xenos took you, rather than burned you with your brothers. You have not told them what you did when the Order came." Noctis fired upward without looking. A lictor skull burst in the darkness above. "The silence is answer enough," Vol said. "I offer release from pretense. Stand with me, not as supplicant, not as slave. I have no need of another kneeling fool. Bring me your shame, and I will make it function. Bring me your hatred, and I will give it a war not wasted in service to a corpse." The descent well opened into the command chamber. For a moment even Noctis stopped. The Ark ship's core filled the cavern beyond. It was a womb fortress, vast beyond sane construction, buried beneath Karthaks like a second heart grown from iron and hunger. Its hull was not complete, because it was still alive and still becoming. Black iron bastions clung to its sides like armor plates on a beast too large for any forge to finish. Tyranid flesh swelled between them in muscular bands. Spore towers rose from its back, each one capped with launch sphincters large enough to swallow gunships. Millions of cysts covered its flanks, each cyst containing a seed organism curled around a payload of hunger, command filament, and warp taint. Engine organs beat beneath translucent shields. Plasma reactors stolen from Karthax's underforge were sunk into its belly, linked to demon engines that strained in chains, their rage converted into thrust. It could launch into the void. It could carry the vol strain across systems. It could seed crusade routes, watch station corridors, agri-worlds, shipyards, shrine moons, and every soft artery the Imperium required to keep bleeding forward. Vol's projection appeared beside Noctis, looking upon the Ark like a father before a favored son. Beautiful, is it not? The Imperium builds walls. Chaos builds idols. The Tyranids build only hunger. I have built consequence. Noctis lifted his bolter toward the core. You cannot kill it with that. No. He mag-locked the bolter to his thigh and drew a Deathwatch teleport Homer from a sealed pouch at his belt. The device was small, black, and silver-armed, its machine spirit dormant beneath a casing etched with kill ciphers. He drove it into a seam of exposed arc flesh, where black iron met pulsing nerve tissue. Barbs unfolded and bit deep. Vol's projection turned slowly. Ah, there you are. Service after all. Noctis activated the Homer. Its rune blinked once, twice. Then the chamber answered, not with Imperial teleport lock, not with the clean bite of shipboard translation. The Ark's bio-warp system woke around the signal like a predator tasting blood. The walls folded. The air became screaming meat and violet light. Somewhere far away, Cordain's voice cut across the vox, distorted by impossible distance. Noctis, report. Noctis drew his blade and braced as reality convulsed. The teleport Homer burned bright, but its signal was seized, swallowed, and inverted. The Ark did not reject the lock. It used it. The Deathwatch runes of Kill Team Epitaph flared across Noctis's visor one by one as the bio-warp system reached through the cathedral, found them, and dragged them all toward the same point. Vol's laughter filled the collapsing chamber. The last thing Noctis saw before the world became red light was the Ark core opening like an eye. Then, Kill Team Epitaph was taken. Reality spat Kill Team Epitaph into the throne laboratory like ammunition fired from a gun that hated them. The transition was wrong. Teleportation by Imperial right was violence refined into mathematics, a moment of atomic dissolution and sanctioned reassembly guided by machine spirit and prayer. This was not that. This was swallowing. This was transit through a throat lined with teeth. Cordain felt his armor become distance, felt his hearts beat in separate places, felt something vast and hungry taste the gene-wrought structure of him before rejecting what it could not immediately own. Red light became black. Black became wet iron. Wet iron became gravity. He landed hard on one knee, bolter already raised. The others appeared around him in staggered bursts of violet distortion and meat-scented steam. Voss struck the floor shield first. Thunderhammer braced across his body. Draven stumbled, one gauntlet ruined, plasma incinerator held in his remaining hand, armor still smoking from old heat and new translation trauma. Rauk materialized beside a column of black machinery, his servo harness snapping open like the legs of an irritated spider. Scaldi hit the deck on his shoulder, burning still, pieces of his armor glowing dull red where Prometheum had cooked him within his own plate. Noctis appeared last, standing upright, blade drawn, as if the Ark had chosen to deposit him with more care or with deeper malice. The chamber around them was too vast to be called a room. It hung above a digestion pit that seemed to contain a continent's worth of dead. The floor was a suspended war platform of black iron, bone struts, and translucent Tyranid ligament, swaying over an abyss of rendered biomass. Far below, whole districts of Hive Task moved in slow dissolution. Towers, hab blocks, manufactorum frames, corpses, tanks, engines, men, beasts, machines, all sank into a churning ocean of digestive acids and feeder organisms. Bodies burst, armor softened, tank hulls caved inward as acid found seams and ammunition cooked beneath the surface. Whenever the pit belched steam, The vapor carried fragments of prayer, screams, Binharic failure cant, and the clicking pulse of the Vol strain. Above the platform hung the arc core, suspended by cables, tendons, and chains. Its engines beat beyond the walls. Each pulse made the throne laboratory tremble. Each pulse sounded more like a heart-learning war. At the far end of the platform, Malrek Vol waited upon his throne. It was not a seat. It was a command engine grown around him and beneath him, a siege altar of iron, chitin, demon-bound pistons, and exposed synapse tissue. He rose from it as the Deathwatch steadied themselves, and the throne unfolded from his armor in chains and cables, reluctant to release its king. In flesh and warplate, Vol was worse than any projection. His Iron Warrior's armor had been fused with Tyranid chitin until it was impossible to tell where trophy ended and transformation began. Iron-grey ceramite showed beneath plates of black and bone-white shell, each graft riveted through with brass nails and crawling nerve wire. Hazard stripes marked his greaves, pauldrons, and gauntlets, like warnings painted on a fortress before detonation. Servo limbs arched from his back, each one ending in a different instrument of murder or surgery. 2 demon-bound siege claws hung over his shoulders, their talons opening and closing with impatient hatred, each movement accompanied by whispers from the warp. Across his upper back and shoulders spread the synapse mantle. It was alive, a cloak of nerve tissue, ribbed chitin, wet filaments, and blinking sensory nodules, grown from captured Tyranid matter and threaded into his armor through the spine. It pulsed in time with the arc core. Black command filaments ran from it into the platform, into the walls, into the cathedral above, and perhaps through the entire dying hive. Every pulse made the lesser organisms in the chamber twitch. Vol lifted his chain axe from beside the throne. The weapon was the size of a mortal man, its teeth made from adamantium, Xenos bone, and something that screamed faintly when the engine woke. "Welcome," he said. His voice filled the chamber without needing amplification. "You are late by the measure of my ambition, and early by the measure of your doom. A tolerable compromise." Cordain rose. Malrek Vol. The Chaos Lord inclined his helm. "Watch Captain Severian Cordain, Black Templar by birth, Deathwatch by utility, executioner by temperament. You carry yourself like a man who mistakes refusal for purity. Your throat seal is exposed beneath the left mandibular plate." Vol laughed, low and almost approving. "Good. I had wondered whether you came to speak or kill. Both waste time." Cordain fired. The kill team moved with him, not after him. Bolters cracked. Kraken rounds and hellfire shells struck Vol's armor in a tight pattern across the chest, throat, and synapse mantle. Draven's plasma weapon shrieked and cast blue light across the platform. Rauk's melter cutter flared against a command filament thick as a man's torso. Noctis vanished left, seeking an angle. Scaldi rose amid smoke and pain, flamer empty, chainblade coughing back to life. Voss advanced straight at the throne, storm shield before him. Vol came to meet them. He did not rush. He advanced through fire as though walking through rain. Bolter shells detonated across his plate, blowing shards from chitin grafts, pitting ceramite, bursting wet nodes along the mantle. The wounds bled black. The mantle shivered, then rerouted its pulsing through secondary filaments. A plasma blast struck his right shoulder and turned a plate of chitin into glowing slag. He rolled with the impact, servo claws digging into the platform, and kept moving. Voss reached him first. Thunderhammer met chain axe with a detonation of force that shook the platform. The impact threw sparks and bone fragments in a storm around them. Voss set his shield, advanced, and struck again. Vol parried with the axe haft, then answered with a demon claw from his back. Voss caught it on the storm shield. The shield's surface screamed as the warp-bound talons carved furrows through its outer plate. "You fight like a wall," Vol said. Voss drove the hammer toward his knee. Vol stepped inside the swing with impossible speed for his size and struck the Imperial fist across the helm with the butt of his axe. Voss staggered. Foal's left gauntlet seized the rim of the storm shield and pulled. Servos whined. Voss braced. The platform cracked beneath his boots. "A wall is useful," Vol continued, "until one brings proper engines." He headbutted Voss hard enough to split the yellow pauldron beneath its black paint. Then the chain axe came around and struck the storm shield edge on. The weapon did not cut through entirely, but it bit deep, teeth screaming, and Vol twisted. The shield wrenched aside. His demon claw punched into Voss's breastplate and hurled him across the platform. The Imperial fist hit the deck, bounced once, and came to rest beside a feeder duct. Armor caved inward at the chest, Thunderhammer still locked in his gauntlet. Cordain moved into the opening with his relic blade drawn. Vol met him with the chain axe. Blade and axe crossed in a burst of sparks. Cordain's style was severe, economical, devoid of flourish. He cut at joints, cables, mantle roots, eye lenses, throat seal. Vol countered with the brutality of siege doctrine given limbs. He forced Cordain backward with hammering blows, each one strong enough to pulp a mortal through a bulkhead. Cordain shifted, turned, let the axe pass close enough to scrape paint from his helm, and drove his blade toward the left mandibular plate he had named. The edge struck. The seal split. For a fraction of a breath, black blood sprayed from beneath Vol's helm. Then a servo limb caught Cordain around the waist and slammed him sideways through a pillar of bone and iron. The pillar shattered. Cordain went through it in a burst of fragments and struck the platform beyond, his armor runes flaring red. His bolter skidded away into a pool of neural fluid. The relic blade remained in his hand. Vol turned as Draven fired again. The plasma shot hit him in the abdomen and burned through a chitin plate. Vol staggered for the first time. Draven fired a second shot, but the weapon screamed beyond tolerance. Its coils flashed white. He kept it raised anyway. "Your weapon is dying," Vol said. Draven's answer was another blast. Vol's living mechadendrite uncoiled from beneath the synapse mantle, faster than any machine limb should move. It was not metal and not flesh, but a braided thing of tendon, iron, and needle teeth. It punched through Draven's lower torso, entered beneath the ribs, and burst from his back in a spray of blood and armor fragments. The Dark Angel did not scream. His plasma weapon fell from his ruined grip and clattered to the deck. Vol lifted him from the floor on the impaling tendril. "Cruelty," the Chaos Lord said, turning so all of them could see Draven hanging there, "is a word used by cowards who dislike precision. I do not torture for joy. Joy is irrelevant. Screams are measurement. Pain is pressure. Obedience is the shape left behind when resistance has been engineered away." Draven's right hand, stripped of flesh where the plasma venting had ruined it, closed around the tendril, piercing him. "Poor measurement," he rasped. He tore a crack grenade from his belt, armed it against Vol's tendril, and let it fall into the wound where the mechadendrite entered his armor. The blast blew the tendril apart. Draven crashed to the floor in pieces of smoke and blood. Vol recoiled, the severed living cable whipping from his mantle and spraying black fluid across the platform. Rauk saw it then. Not merely damage, not merely pain. The mantle did not recoil because Vol commanded it. It recoiled before he did. Its filaments tightened into his spine. Its nodes pulsed in patterns that did not match his movement. The command web was not flowing from him into the brood. It was flowing through him. "Watch, Captain," Rauk said. "The synapse mantle has superseded his authority." Cordan forced himself upright, one hand against the broken pillar. "Clarify." "Vol is no longer sole command. He is transitional architecture. The Vol strain is using him as a synapse organism." Vol turned slowly toward the iron hand. For the first time, his silence had weight. Rauk continued, merciless. "You did not chain hunger. You provided it with a throne." The chamber screamed. Above Vol's throne, the restraints around the winged Tyranid Prime burst apart. It had been held in a cruciform cage of black iron and warding chains, half hidden behind the throne engine. Now the chains snapped one by one. The creature unfolded its wings, membrane and cable spreading wide enough to cast the platform in shadow. The Iron Warrior's helm fused into its skull, burned with one red lens and one darkness-filled socket. The demon behind that socket whispered through the chamber, not in words, but in promises of famine. Magos Excruciator Domak Sever scuttled from a side gantry, limbs clacking in panic. Primary specimen breach, control impulse failure, reasserting dominance lattice, reasserting. The Prime descended on him. Sever fired syringes, shock hooks, code spikes, and surgical lasers. The Prime ignored them. One talon pinned the Magos to the deck. Another split his torso frame open. Sever's mask cracked, revealing wet tubing and a scrap of meat that might once have been a face. He shrieked Binharic denial as the Prime lowered its head and bit into him. It did not simply kill. It fed through him, devouring flesh, augmetic memory, command codes, and the remnants of every vile procedure he had performed. His mechanical legs kicked until the Prime tore them away and swallowed the spine node that governed them. The cathedral shuddered. The command network changed hands. Across the walls, Vol's filaments began to pulse in the Prime's rhythm. Vol looked from the creature to his own mantle. His servo claws flexed. For a breath he seemed to draw, himself taller, imposing will upon the body that had betrayed him. "No," he said quietly. The Prime answered through every dead mouth in the chamber. Hunger. The word was not spoken. It was impressed upon bone. Vol raised his axe toward the Prime, but the synapse mantle locked. His own filaments seized his spine and dragged him half a step backward. He fought it. Armor servos screamed. Chitin plates cracked. The Chaos Lord who had broken cities and bred nightmares strained against the hunger he had taught to hate. Cordain saw the moment. "Kill pattern epitaph," he said. "Mantle severance. Voss, pin, Rauk, burn the command filaments. Noctis, left root cluster. Scaldi, clear lesser organisms. Draven, live if useful." Draven moved one hand in acknowledgement from where he lay bleeding. Voss rose. His chest plate was crushed. His breath came as a wet rasp over the Vox. He lifted the broken storm shield and thunderhammer and charged again. Vol turned just in time to meet him. Voss did not strike for the head. He struck the platform at Vol's feet. The thunderhammer detonated against the deck, buckling the support plates and dropping Vol's left leg into a rent of torn iron. Voss slammed the ruined shield into the Chaos Lord's torso and held him there, locking him in place with the full strength of an imperial fist built for siege endurance. Noctis came from the left, like a shadow given judgment. His Xenophase blade cut through the first mantle root without resistance. It parted nerve tissue, warped metal, and command cable in a single silent stroke. Vol roared, not in pain alone, but in outrage. A servo claw lashed at Noctis. He ducked beneath it, lost a strip of armor from his shoulder, and cut again. The second root fell away, writhing on the deck like a severed serpent. Rauk advanced into the storm of flailing filaments. His melter cutter burned white. A command cable struck his helm and cracked one lens. Another punched through his side armor and lodged in the black carapace beneath. He ignored it. His remaining servo limbs seized the thickest filaments and held them steady while the melter cutter ate through them one by one. Burning synapse matter filled the air with the stink of cooked brain and hot iron. Scaldi, blackened and limping, met the lesser organisms pouring from the throne walls. His chain blade finally died in the body of a gaunt. He drew a combat knife and kept killing. One beast bit into his forearm. He crushed its skull against his chest. Another climbed his back. He reached over his shoulder, tore it free, and hurled it into the digestion pit. Cordain came last, relic blade in both hands, armor broken, silver arm dark with blood and ichor. He crossed the platform, while Vol struggled against Voss, Rauk, Noctis, the Prime's override, and his own collapsing dream. The Chaos Lord saw him. Even pinned, even betrayed, even unraveling, Vol laughed. "There," he said, "there is the truth of you. Not savior, not knight, butcher." Cordain stepped inside the arc of the ruined chain axe. Yes. He drove the relic blade upward through the exposed throat seal. The edge punched beneath the helm, through black blood, through reinforced neck cabling, through the meat and bone of an ancient traitor who had once been made to conquer worlds in the Emperor's name. Cordain kept pushing until the blade grated against the back of Vol's helm. The Chaos Lord's red lenses flickered. His hands locked around Cordain's shoulders, claws digging into ceramite. For a moment it seemed he might still tear the watch captain apart by strength alone. Then Noctis cut the final mantle route. Rauk burned through the last command filament. Voss drove the thunderhammer into Vol's trapped knee and shattered it inward. Vol sagged against Cordain's blade. The winged prime shrieked from above the throne, the cathedral network spasming as control snapped loose and sought new pathways. Vol's voice came wet through the ruined seal. "You are still late." Cordain twisted the blade. The Chaos Lord laughed. Blood poured from the broken grill of his helm. His hands tightened once, then weakened. The first seed has flown. A rune ignited across Rauk's damaged auspex. Launch detected. Far above them, through kilometers of hive, stone, ash, and war, the Ark ship's outer womb opened. A brood seed tore free from its launch cradle and screamed toward orbit, carrying within it the first living fragment of Malrek Vol's obedient hunger. The first brood seed reached the upper void before the Imperial Navy killed it. It rose from the split body of Karthak Secundus in a column of ash, smoke, and birthing fluid, a living projectile wrapped in black iron ribs and chitin plates. Its outer shell flexed as it climbed. Spore vents along its sides opened and closed, like the gills of some deep ocean thing dragged into space against its will. Lance beams from the nearest cruiser crossed the darkness and found it just beyond the planet's atmosphere. For a breath, it became a second moon, lit from within by white fire. Then it burst, and the void filled with burning spores, shredded membrane, fragments of command filaments, and thousands of unborn organisms flash frozen before they could ever taste air. The men aboard the Navy ships cheered for less than a heartbeat. Then Karthax itself broke open. The Ark ship clawed upward from beneath Hive Task, like a god trying to escape its grave. The western quarter of the Hive collapsed into a rising wound of black iron and living flesh. Spires toppled. Manufactorum domes split apart. Entire districts slid from its back in avalanches of habitation blocks, workers, tanks, artillery parks, cathedral stacks, and molten reactor bones. Beneath them rose the thing Malrek Vol had built and failed to master. It was a fortress that breathed. Black iron bastions jutted from its flanks, each one crowned with weapon blisters and spore chimneys. Tyranid muscle bound the plates together, flexing with obscene strength as the Ark tore itself free from the planet's crust. Demon engines chained into its belly screamed thrust into being, their rage converted into propulsion by engines that were half reactor, half organ, half blasphemy beyond arithmetic. Birthing smoke poured from it in choking clouds. Millions of cysts trembled across its sides, and each cyst held a curled shape waiting for release. Around Karthak Secundus, the Imperial Navy opened fire. Lance batteries drew white wounds across the dark. Macro batteries hurled shells the size of shrine towers. Torpedoes burned through the debris field in long, righteous wakes. The Ark took the punishment and kept rising. Plates of chitin and iron exploded from its hull. Vast sections of living armor boiled under lance strikes. Spore towers burst and emptied flaming contents into space, but every wound sealed too slowly and too stubbornly to satisfy the watching guns. The Ark was not built to endure forever. It was built to live long enough to scatter death. It began to launch. Spore clouds jetted into the void in great pulses. each cloud glittering with hard-shelled brood pods and smaller mines that swam through vacuum with twitching tails. Navy point defense answered with flak, laser fire, and streams of explosive shells. Thousands of spores died, tens of thousands. More came. Some struck escort frigates and clung there, chewing at armor, burrowing toward gun decks, bridge towers, munition vaults, and airlocks. Men fought them with flamers in corridors, while their ships kept firing into the monster below. On the strategium of the Oath of Oblivion, Inquisitor Lord Acastian Vare watched the engagement without expression. "Teleportarium lock," he said. A tech adept bent over the control pit. "Unstable, my lord. The Ark is wrapped in bio-warp interference. Its inner mass is shifting. Standard translation risks displacement into living structure." Vare looked down into the hollow image of the rising Ark. "Then pray with greater conviction." The adept swallowed. "By your will?" "No," Vare said. "By necessity." Below, in the teleportarium chamber, Kill Team Epitaph prepared for their last insertion. They were no longer the untouched Black Angels that had descended into Hive Task. Their armor was cracked, burned, scarred, and wet with the blood of enemies and brothers. Cordain stood with his relic blade in hand and a bolter taken from a dead Deathwatch reliquary rack mag locked to his thigh. Voss leaned against the weight of his broken storm shield, chest plate crushed inward, thunderhammer still functional by the grace of stubborn machine spirits and the strength of his arm. Scaldi stood because rage held him where flesh should have failed, his armor blackened, one lens cracked, the wound in his side sealed by clamps and spite. Draven was pale beneath his helm. According to his life runes, impaled wounds sealed only by emergency foam and discipline. Rauk bore the cyclonic charges across his harness, his damaged servo limbs locked tight around them, like a priest carrying holy remains. Noctis said nothing. His blade was drawn before the teleport cycle began. Cordain looked at the squad runes. All were red, none were broken. "Objective," he said. "Destroy the Ark core," Rauk answered. "Secondary. Prevent viable dispersal. Extraction," Voss gave the answer. "Permitted only after charge confirmation." Scaldi gave a rough laugh. "There is the comfort of the long vigil." Noctis looked toward the teleportarium's iron doors. "The Prime is aboard." Cordain turned his helm. "Confirmed. I marked the core. It will come to the wound. Then kill it." Noctis inclined his head once. "Yes." The teleportarium choir began to chant. The chamber filled with cold light and the stink of ozone. Cables pulsed overhead. Runes crawled across the floor. The machine spirit of the Oath of Oblivion fought the Ark's living interference and bit down hard. Vare's voice entered their helms. "Watch Captain Cordain. If you fail, I will burn the world regardless." Cordain answered, "You were always going to burn it." "Yes. Then we are in agreement." The teleport beam took them. This time the transition was agony sharpened by Imperial purpose. The Ark tried to swallow them again. The ship tried to place them. For a heartbeat, Cordain existed in a red tunnel of screaming tissue and silver mathematics. Then the Deathwatch arrived inside the Ark ship and brought war with them. The corridor was alive. Its walls were ribbed with muscle and iron reinforcement. The floor flexed under their boots. Teeth lined the seams where armor plates met flesh. They snapped at ankles, cables, weapon straps, exposed seals. Every wound in the wall bled black fluid and birthed feeder organisms no larger than hands, but fast enough to find weak points. The air was wet, hot, and full of spores. Rauk released counter-agents immediately, silver mist hissing from his harness. Draven's plasma incinerator fired down the corridor and turned the first wave of gaunts into blue-white vapor. They advanced. There was no time for full clearance, no time for caution beyond necessity. Cordain cut through a living membrane with his relic blade and entered a chamber where cysts hung in rows from the ceiling. He fired into them while moving, each bolt round bursting unborn creatures in showers of slime, bone, and half-formed talons. Voss held the rear, hammering anything that tried to follow them, his shield now more wreckage than protection. Scaldi fought in the middle, knife in one hand, dead chainblade in the other, using the useless weapon as a club when its teeth would no longer turn. Noctis moved ahead, killing nodes before they could fully wake. The Ark fought with its own body. A wall folded inward and crushed Draven against a ribbed support column. His armor screamed. Voss struck the wall with the Thunderhammer, cracking it open, and Scaldi dragged the Dark Angel free. Draven rose with one arm hanging useless and still lifted his plasma weapon. "Can you fire?" Cordain asked. Draven answered by burning a warrior organism through the chest before it cleared the next hatch. They reached the first charge site, a pulsing artery chamber where reactor cables entered a knot of command tissue. Rauk anchored the cyclonic charge into the living floor. Barbs extended. The device drank power from its own sealed heart and armed by degrees. Feeder organisms came from everywhere. They poured from ceiling pores, cracked vents, torn cysts, and the exposed wounds their own weapons had made. They were small, but there were too many to count. They crawled under armor plates. They bit into cables. They threw themselves into joints and weapon ports. Rauk remained kneeling over the charge, one gauntlet locked on the detonation right panel, while the other fired his bolter into the swarm. "Move," Cordain said. "Right incomplete." "We hold." "No," Rauk said. "You continue." A feeder beast bit through the cable cluster at his waist. Another disappeared beneath his chest plate. His life runes stuttered. His servo harness impaled 3 organisms, crushed 2 more, and then locked as they chewed into its motive bundles. He spoke in Binharik first, then in Low Gothic, calm as a bell tolling in an empty forge. "Spirit of the sacred charge, awaken. Spirit of the severing flame, remember your maker. Spirit of the iron shell, deny corruption. By the Omnissiah's hidden name, function is worship." The charge rune turned green. A gaunt forced its head into the torn seam beneath Rauk's helm and began chewing through the armor cabling. Black blood ran down his breastplate. "Charge armed," he said. Cordain took one step toward him. Rauk turned his cracked helm. "Containment is mercy." The iron hand triggered the local purge burst. White fire filled the artery chamber behind them as Kill Team Epitaph moved on. Rauk's rune vanished from the display without a scream. They did not stop. The second charge site lay beyond a womb corridor where millions of unborn organisms floated behind translucent walls. Cordain saw them as he passed. Not mindless spawn, not simple gaunts. Some had gun limbs, some had wings, some had synapse crests threaded with black iron, some had human hands fused into their chests, twitching as if remembering prayer. Each one was a seed of war waiting to fall upon Imperial space. At the corridor's end, the Tyranid Prime came for Noctis. It unfolded from the ceiling, wings spreading across the passage. The Iron Warrior's helm fused into its skull, glowing with stolen command light. The demon in its dark socket whispered through the walls. Lesser organisms froze around it, then withdrew, leaving the corridor clear. Noctis stepped forward. Cordain understood and kept moving. The black shield met the Prime alone beneath the hanging unborn. The creature struck first, talons crossing where his head had been. Noctis slid under the blow and cut across its lower limb, his Xenophase blade passing through chitin and grafted iron. The Prime twisted, faster than a thought, and its wing claw punched through his side. His armor buckled, blood sprayed across the womb wall. He fired his Stalker bolter point blank into the creature's helm lens. The shot cracked the red glass, but did not stop it. They fought in silence except for impacts. Talons tore ceramite. The Xenophase blade opened wounds that bled black and violet. The Prime bit into Noctis's shoulder and lifted him from the floor. He drove a combat blade under its jaw, then triggered the blade's charge. The lower half of the creature's face burst outward. It dropped him. He landed on one knee, rose, and took the final strike through the abdomen. The talon went through him and into the wall. Noctis used the wound to hold himself in place. He drove the Xenophase blade up through the cracked helm lens and into the demon dark behind it. For the first time, the Prime screamed. The sound passed through the ark and made unborn things convulse in their sacks. The demon whisper became a shriek, then a tearing absence. The Prime thrashed, impaled Noctis deeper, then sagged as the blade cut through the last of its command brain. Cordain reached the far hatch and looked back. Noctis stood pinned to the wall by the dead Prime's talon, blood pouring down his armor. His rune flashed black and red. "Extraction will take you," Cordain said. "No. That is an order." Noctis turned his helm slowly. "My name is buried. Let the body follow." Cordain held the gaze for one breath. Duty witnessed. Noctis bowed his head. The hatch sealed between them. Draven died at the second charge site. Not quickly, not uselessly. He held the approach while Cordain and Voss armed the device with Rauk's extracted rights. His plasma incinerator finally failed in his hands, the core splitting open and flooding his armor with lethal heat. Draven locked the weapon against his chest, stepped into the enemy press, and vented the dying plasma outward. The blast turned the corridor into a tunnel of blue fire. When the light faded, he was kneeling among fused Xeno's remains, armor melted into the floor, helm bowed as if in contemplation. Cordain did not speak over him. There was no time, and Draven would not have wanted it wasted. 3 remained: Cordain, Voss, Scaldi. They reached the central womb as the ark cleared the upper atmosphere. The chamber was larger than a cathedral, larger than a Hive District shrine, larger than any sane vessel heart. It opened before them in red darkness, every wall layered with cysts, every cyst filled with life. Millions of unborn Volstrain organisms hung in ordered ranks, waiting to be launched into the void. The central womb pulsed above a black pit, feeding spore towers that aimed outward toward Imperial space. Within that pulse, Cordain saw the future Vol had almost made. Watch fortresses choked by their own dead, crusade fleets seeded from within, shrine worlds devoured under banners that still showed the Aquila, the Imperium bleeding from hidden wounds until no wall, no oath, no quarantine could hold. Voss set the final cyclonic charge. Scaldi stood beside him, barely upright, stabbing feeder beasts from the air as they leapt. Cordain defended the arming right with bolter and blade. His ammunition ran dry. He drew the relic blade in both hands and cut until the floor was slick beneath his boots. The charge armed. Cordain activated the teleport beacon. This time, the Oath of Oblivion found them cleanly because the ark was dying around them. The beam took Cordain, Voss, and Scaldi from the central womb as the first detonation began to bloom. From orbit, the ark ship opened in silence. Cyclonic fire does not merely explode, it denies. It unmade the central womb, then the command arteries, then the engine organs, then the birthing cysts. The ark split along its spine in a spreading sphere of white destruction. Spores died by the million. Chitin became ash. Iron became vapor. Demon engines howled as their bindings failed and the fire ate them. The living fortress that had clawed its way toward the stars became a burning carcass above the world that had birthed it. On the Oath of Oblivion, Cordain collapsed to one knee in the teleportarium. Voss fell beside him, shield still locked to his arm. Scaldi remained standing for 3 breaths, then crashed onto his back and began laughing through a mouthful of blood. Inquisitor Vare entered the chamber as Medici serfs and armor thralls rushed forward. "The Ark is destroyed," the shipmaster voxed. Vare looked through the open tactical feed at Karthak Secundus below. Hive Task was a cratered wound. The ash wastes crawled with surviving Volstrain organisms. Spore blooms still drifted across continents. The artificial synapse had been broken, but not every beast was dead. Not every sample was ash. Not every witness had burned. "Exterminatus," Vare said. The shipmaster's voice trembled. "My lord, with the Ark gone, reclamation may be possible after full orbital purge and ground containment." Vare turned toward him. No further objection came. The order passed through the fleet. Cyclonic torpedoes were armed. Life-eater warheads were blessed. Lance batteries aligned not for battle, but for sentence. Across Karthak Secundus, men looked up from trenches, burning hives, quarantine camps, command bunkers, and corpse-choked manufactoria. Some saw the fire coming. Most did not. Billions remained below, infected, clean, loyal, damned, useful, innocent, guilty. None of those distinctions mattered anymore. Containment was mercy. The torpedoes fell. Atmosphere ignited in chemical storms. Oceans of industrial runoff flashed into poison steam. Hive cities became pillars of fire. The ash wastes turned to glass. The lower crust cracked under successive impacts, venting the planet's furnace heart. Every organism on the surface screamed, prayed, burned, burst, or vanished into the same sanctioned flame. Karthak Secundus died beneath the Emperor's mercy, and the void around it shone with the light of a world denied to the Xenos and the heretic. Cordain watched from the Medici slab, while serfs cut pieces of ruined armor from his body. Voss lay silent nearby, heart still beating. Scaldi laughed once more, weaker this time, then began reciting the names of the dead in a Fenrisian growl, until pain stole his voice. Vare stood over them. 3 survivors, he said. Acceptable. Cordain turned his helmless face toward the burning world. His eyes were bloodshot, blackened at the edges by burst vessels and smoke. No, he said. Vare looked at him. Cordain closed his eyes. Necessary. Far from Carthax, beyond the kill radius, beyond the fleet cordon, beyond the last sanctioned listening post, a relay moon drifted cold and forgotten in the outer dark. Its astropathic choir had died when the first signal screamed through them. Their bodies remained chained in their chairs, blind heads bowed, mouths crusted with old blood. One dead. Astropath lifted his face. His lips moved. In the silence of the relay chapel, with no breath in his lungs, and no soul left cleanly his own, he whispered Malrek Vol's last words. Hunger remembers.